towards the a5 square and ask black some questions that you're gonna push that pawn to a5 and then try to activate that bishop via a6, or do you just sit tight, or do you try to use the momentum that the knight has moved to b1 and then try to break in the center with d6, d5, but then you break the construction and the bishop on g3 comes to life. There are so many different options for black. However, I feel that this is very much a critical moment. If you give white two moves, knight d2, knight b3, or knight d2, knight c4, then black will get under serious pressure.
And Magnus playing the board as well as the clock, posing Vincent with a difficult decision. Now, a5 makes a lot of sense from the perspective of activating the bishop, but it also has a very clear drawback, because as long as the pawn is on a6, it's very nicely defended by the bishop. You feel this sense of comfort that, okay, I'm probably not going to lose any pawns. When you play a5, all bets are off. That pawn is now on a dark square. It's harder to defend. And in certain situations, the plan can actually backfire with the knight dropping into c4. And then you have to keep tabs on bishop takes d6 related ideas. So it's not the kind of decision that you make lightly. The question then is, after a5, is white going to fix the pawn on a dark square with a4? Is Magnus going to continue with his plan and go knight d2? How is the game likely to unfold? Should Vincent make this gutsy decision to play a5?
Yeah, e5 is a very natural move, and exactly as you rightly pointed out, that the big question, how does white reacts to that? Yeah, if you play the move a4, yes, there are some arguments to fix that pawn on a5. Eventually, if we remove all the heavy pieces, white will have the option of going bishop e1, targeting that pawn on a5, and it will be very difficult to protect. So those kind of things one has to keep in mind. On the other hand, after a4, black gets very direct play with bishop a6 and eventually bringing the rook to b4 via b8 and create counterplay with a timely c6, c5 idea and c4 if white is playing b3. Yeah, this is a very interesting strategical situation, and that's why I'm absolutely in the dark how Magnus would react after a move like a5.
And if he eschews the move a4, and actually Vincent has played a move, and it's not a5, but rather c6 to c5. So let's transition back to the live board. c5 has been played, and much like a5, I think this is a very sensible move. He is improving his structure. He is creating for himself potentially a square on c4, which is of course not a reliable square because white can chase the knight away, but still it's something, and he's opening up some real estate potentially for his bishop. It doesn't mean that he won't play a5, but I actually really like this approach as well.
Yes, it's, I believe, the more natural human way of playing and dealing with the problems, because after a5 there are at least these questions that maybe in the long term the pawn on a5 will be weak. After the move c65, you see that everything is protected. You get control of the d4 square. You eventually also have ideas like bishop c6, just to put that bishop a little bit in a more active square. Black might be shifting eventually towards the rook b8 plan, trying to create something on the b file, but it doesn't really look serious. I'm not even sure that black really wants to move that rook away. And the big question is how white is planning to break through. Yeah, Magnus needs to win this game. And the move c5 did weaken the d5 square. Yeah, so one could even argue that knight c3, knight d5 could be an idea, but I don't believe that Magnus wants to give the chance for black to trade those bishops. I mean, that bishop for the knight, and remain with a solid, good black knight against white's bishop. Many strategical finesses here.
For sure. And there's also, of course, the continuation of the maneuver with knight to d2 and then knight to c4. And I pointed out earlier the prospect of bishop takes d6, which Vincent would have to keep a close eye on because it actually does become a serious threat if Magnus's knight lands on c4. So in the event of knight d2, okay, maybe then Vincent plays a5, but I think finesse and finesses, that is the keyword in this endgame. It's really all about these subtle points related to maneuvering, related to piece placement. But I think Vincent definitely has good chances here. He's got a solid position. I think he feels pretty confident in his ability to hold his own, and his time situation is not dire. Given that it's an endgame, okay, it's not great. He's got 20 minutes for 15 moves, but it's not the same as having this very same time situation, but in a position like the one that Vidit has, which we will revisit shortly.
Yes, I mean, basically here the price of each move is not very high. Now I also understood why my heart was leaning towards bishop b7 to c6, because you are constantly threatening with this knight d2, knight c4, and eventually hitting on d6. And with bishop c6, I can always have bishop b5 idea against knight c4, which basically secures black's position.
Good call there. I think Magnus, I know he played c4. I thought he played knight c3, but no, c4, clamping down on the d5 square. But what a committal decision that is, because now this pawn is stuck on a light square, and that merely increases the appeal of this a5 bishop a6 idea. What do you make of this latest development before we go on to the Vidit game?
Yeah, it's a shocking development, and I understand the choice, because Magnus needs to win the game, and I believe that probably this is the only chance to try to spice things up. For example, if black plays a move like a5, then there's an argument for white to fix the pawn structure on the queen side with a4, b3, and then land the knight on b5. This could be a long-term pressure.
And your idea of bishop e1 could be very unpleasant. So maybe black should start with the move bishop c6 to prevent a4. And after knight c3, maintain some sort of flexibility with a move like rook d8 to b8, and only play a5, perhaps now, because a4 is now met with a concrete rook b4.
Yes, exactly. I mean, we only touch a5 if we know exactly that white is unable to block the queen side. The good news is for black, after c4, the d4 square is also weak, so it's not only that white gets access to the d5 square, which is true, but black also has this knight d4 counterplay. It's, I would say, a desperate try by Magnus to try to get something out of this very solid position.
Vincent will have to keep his composure in this endgame. He seems to be doing that very well thus far, but I think the next 5 to 7 moves are going to determine a lot. Obviously, we will keep a close eye on this game as it moves toward the all-important 40th move, when 30 minutes are added to the players' clocks. But the game that has been swirling in our minds is a crazy affair between Vidit and Etienne Bacrot. This game wasn't always crazy. It was always tense, but things went totally haywire when Vidit, who only needs a draw, decided to nonetheless sacrifice a piece and go for the kill. It happened in the following position. There was a trade on c4 as Etienne expands on the king side, and bishop takes g4 with knight takes g4.
Wow.
A very tempting sacrifice, a very gutsy sacrifice, which leads to complete pandemonium on the board, Peter. Queen h4. Now Etienne defends against the mate in one threat by vacating an escape square for his king. And another crazy move, f7, f5, creating the pawn cube. Queen e1 by Bacrot, a trade of queens, and rook takes b2 by Vidit, who's only got 6 minutes for 20 moves.
Yeah, wow. I mean, okay, black got quite a lot of pawns, but it's very nice news for white that the queens are off the board, so white's king is more or less safe. I mean, okay, with the dark squared bishop still alive for black, it's difficult to say that that king on g1 is already perfectly safe, but definitely much more safe than otherwise. The big question, how do we handle the tension in the center? Yeah, because this f5 pawn is really challenging white's e4 pawn, and e takes f5, g takes f5 leads to such crazy position like knight g3, e4, and then d3, bishop d4 check. I mean, try to evaluate that position.
It's terrifying. And so my inclination would be to start with the move knight g3 somehow, in order to prevent black from building up that massive pawn chain in the center. But the problem here is that black can play e takes f4 himself. And now the issue is, okay, white probably recaptures with the knight. Black can play f takes c4. Now, you definitely shouldn't take with the rook, because then you weaken the back rank. You allow knight e3. You should take with the knight. And apparently there's this move d3, squeezing the pawn through. And what happens is that after white plays knight takes d3, there is a nasty little check on d4. Then black takes on f3, and suddenly you cannot recapture because you get mated in one with this beautiful mating construction. Now, not to despair, white can take the other rook, but now black travels to the other side of the board and picks up the a2 pawn. The smoke clears, And I think we're not unlikely to get a situation where black maintains 3 pawns for the piece, which would be totally sufficient compensation. If Vidit can reach a position like this, not only can he find it a little bit easier to play in time pressure, but he should be able to hold his own. But there's a vast gulf between the current position and the line that we calculated. No way to predict what's going to happen here, Peter.
Yeah, it's very difficult. I mean, that was the feeling, yeah, that the queens are traded. Still, White's king on g1 is in some danger, because ever this bishop lands on d4, it will be very awkward. I'm trying to make sense that can I somehow try to block the position with knight c1, knight d3? Of course, if I could, it would be fantastic, but black definitely has also some chances of opening up the position even here.
Yeah, and here you would have to decide, okay, do you play f takes e4? Do you play e takes f4? This is like a nauseatingly complicated position, and I have no idea how Vidit is going to handle this with 6 minutes on his clock.
Yeah, that's a very tough challenge. I mean, I feel like knight c1 is a very human move. I do see that the computer indicates that e takes f5 is apparently very strong, but I don't get it. Let's just quickly... knight g3, e4, and computer does not care about e4?
Rook b3 doesn't care about the pawn chain.
Wow, I mean, okay, this is shocking, because the human brain after e4 stops and says, no, not take on b3. I would never take on b3. I would take on a2.
Oh, and look at this. Knight takes pawn. Just completely ignoring these pawns because they're collapsing. Rook f5, there's a fork. And if black plays d2, you simply put the rook in front of the pawn. And here's what's more. e3, you actually do not take on e3. If you take on e3, then after knight e3, suddenly black picks off the knight with bishop d4 and rook e8. Instead, you play the unbelievably cold-blooded move, bishop to f3, using all of your pieces to keep black's pawn chain at bay. But try calculating this if you're Etienne Bacro.
Yeah, the problem is that the human brain just does not function like this. You have to ef, gf, knight g3. When you see that, oh my god, black gets the move e5, e4 in, the bishop opens up, it lands on d4 in just 2 moves. But yeah, that's why computers are so incredibly strong, and why we hate playing against them. Because the human feeling, yes, sometimes tells you that, wow, but this is nice. And then computer just outcalculates you and understands the situation better because of move per move calculation. I believe, because Etienne has so much time on the clock, he definitely will check the first alternative knight g3, knight c1, and if he is not fully satisfied with them, then automatically he will at least consider e takes f5, but it's so difficult humanly to even get deeply involved with this. That's the trick.
Let alone, okay, e5, there is the immediate e4, which doesn't work, but still. The thing is, and we talked about this on our previous show, when you see the engine line, you stop fearing ghosts. So you are literally unable to put yourself in the shoes of someone who doesn't see the engine line. So you look at it and you say, well, what's the problem? Black has pawns on e4 and d3, but it's quite easy to stop their progress. Well, yeah, that's because you know that the move, for example, is bishop g2 to f3. 7 moves into the line, you have to realize that you ignore the hanging pawn on e3. There are so many details that you take for granted when you check the engine line. And it's so important to have that empathy for the players and to realize that the enemies at their door are a lot bigger and scarier and more frightening because they don't have, hopefully, the services of the computer. Now, off we go. There is a big moment, I think, in the Hikaru game. If we could take perhaps a quick look at that one, Nakamura has just made a really big decision. And that position is transforming.
Wow. Okay, but now black seems to be out of any danger, I guess. If he ever was. Yeah, that's that's another question.
Yeah. Is this heading toward what I think it's heading toward?
Yeah, I mean, okay, white is maybe tiny a little bit better because the bishop can target the d6 or potentially the g7 pawns, but black seems to be active enough to generate counterplay. Yeah, rook hf8 is coming. Black can also make the move g5. And I'm not seeing Prague getting anything out of this position.
Quick update, by the way, and we'll continue to analyze. We have a couple of games finished. Dominguez and Wojciech have made a draw. They are going to tiebreak. And Jan Nepomniachtchi has held that worst endgame, and he's held it with a lot of confidence against Nihal Sarin. That game ends in a draw, and they are similarly going to tie breaks. Finally, Niels Grandelius, kind of as we expected, performs excellently in that endgame, holds easily against Jaime Santos Latasa, and he advances to the next round. The end of the road for the young Spanish talent. Unfortunately, Niels Grandelius is an absolute beast. Okay, on that note, we could go back to this position. Rook HF8, very natural move, attacking F3 and trying to induce the weakening move F4, which would soften up a couple of light squares in the center.
Yes, I mean, I don't really like the move F4. On the other hand, the F3 pawn is hanging. I do believe that White has no right to fight for advantage anymore, and probably if we just go back 2 moves, just to highlight that, yes, Black was breaking the construction, and we do see that computers suggest that here there was a stunning E4, E5 move, just sacrificing a pawn for so-called nothing. These are the type of sacrifices we spoke about that only computer can make, no human will even really get into it. If you know that this is an interesting idea, and the whole point is to follow it up with F3, F4, and fighting for the dark squares, locking the H7 bishop out of the game, but this is something from another planet.
Totally, because even here, hey, try evaluating this position. Apparently, after bishop e3, the deciding factor is the fact that this bishop is so out of the game, and it's very hard to redeploy the bishop. Black needs something like 3 moves to get the bishop back into the game, and in that time, White is going to shove this pawn down to a5 and wreak havoc on the queen side. But that's not even the only line. After e5, you have to factor in the move f4 check, and you have to realize that this is good. There's some random queen a3 moves. In any case, cannot blame Prague even for a second. Cannot blame the birthday boy for quickly taking on f5. And now we go back to the live board. f4 has been played, so Hikaru successful in inducing that move, and h5, very instructive positional move, excellent positional move, preventing White from driving a wedge into Black's position with h6, h5. Hikaru playing against these weak light squares.
Yes, and okay, this light square bishop on h7 is a monster, which can eventually also be activated via f5, g4, and so on. I think that Prague needs to be careful. I mean, knowing that how tricky Hikaru is, and he always senses this moment that he already survived the worst in this game, he definitely equalized, and if Prague is still making 1-2 moves, not entirely clear if he's playing for an advantage or he's playing just to shut the game down, then it can be very tricky for him. If he understands and he says like, you know what, okay, I had my chance, but I don't believe that here I have a chance and I want to be solid, then of course he's not running any risk.
Absolutely. And we will keep an eye as Prague tries to stabilize the situation and make a draw, force the tie breaks. What an incredible tiebreaker match that would be. We have to go quickly. We have to make a beeline for the Robson Caruana game, because Ray Robson has unfortunately potentially lost control both of his clock and of his position. And we have just come at the perfect moment. Fabiano Caruana has sacrificed a bishop on h6. Peter, we can give ourselves a pat on the back because we pointed this idea out a long time ago, and now Fabiano Caruana brings it to fruition. The queen threatens to jump into h6, but the point to understand is that knight f4 is met, I think, with the simple g3.
Yes, in order, however, to make that idea work, which was so typical in the position, and we highlighted it before, but Fabi came up with the stunning bishop b3 move on move 17, a move which we ignored because we were going for the rook b1, queen takes a2 lines. Bishop b3 was a game changer. This really disbalanced Ray, and yes, the computer somehow reacts to it, but over the board the clock is ticking, and just within a couple of moves, Ray is putting himself into a very difficult situation.
And apparently Ray had this insane move, d65, which was the only way to keep the balance, but instead he evacuated his queen. Fabi stuck his knight on this beautiful square. Ray completed the evacuation. He is up a pawn, and bang, there's bishop takes h6. The queen moves up to d2, and there is the move g3. And Ray, in a world of hurt here, he has the move knight takes h3 check. I think a lot of newer players would be tempted by that move, and understandably so. But once the king moves up to g2, there is no way to stop the queen from making that beeline for h6. And once it does, there are way too many threats against Black's king. The power of a knight on f5 is on full display here. So the only thing for Ray to do, Peter, I think, is to leave the knight on f4 and try to make arrangements to guarantee the relative safety of his king. There is no way to do that, but maybe you go king h8 and rook g8 check and desperately hope for some counter chances against White's king. Is this totally hopeless, or can you see a silver lining here for Ray?
Yeah, I'm trying to understand, how to stay in the game, because there is one more argument that knight f6 to h5, reinforcing the knight, and after g takes f4, we capture back with the knight. We give the knight back, and White has some terrific initiative. He can also include rook c1 move or whatever at some point. The g file is also opening up. It's a very unpleasant situation, but the problem is that if instead of knight h5 we play the move king h8, I also still don't see how I can put up a fight after g takes f4. Yeah, okay, we give a check with rook g8, but White will play the move king h2, and what did we really achieve?
And then f takes c5 is a massive threat, and White, once he recovers the piece, isn't even down any material. I would go so far as to say that White doesn't have to hurry to capture the knight on f4 because it's not going anywhere. And perhaps White could even set himself up for the subsequent attack by playing the preparatory move king g1 to h2, which, if you think about it, is actually a very logical move, because once you play g takes f4, you want to be ready to occupy the g file with your rook and potentially launch a mating attack. But that's, pretty next level. You could also play this more simply. You could recapture the knight on f4, and the computer clearly, Peter, has not had its breakfast today, because it is suggesting in some lines to play the simple rook a1 takes a5. Hey, that's a pawn, but more importantly, rook takes a5 applies lateral pressure on the e5 pawn. The e5 pawn supports the knight on f4, and without the support, the pawn on h6 is going to fall with checkmate.
Yeah, this rook takes a5 idea is completely stunning because it suddenly appears from nowhere. I believe that White's position is already winning enough without that brutal move, but if that move even exists, then all the better for White. Yeah, Ray has opted for my suggestion, knight f6 to h5, because I just didn't feel like there is any other move. But the position looks very bad.
As does his clock situation. This is stunningly bad. 3 minutes for, I don't even want to count how many moves, 19 moves. And this is just, if he pulls this one out, that would be a miracle of miracles. That would rival the Ju and June game if Ray somehow stays afloat, 2 move 40, makes time control, and then survives. Fabi, plenty of time to figure out the proper way to complete this attack. This has been an excellent positional game. Then a tactical sequence with bishop takes h6. All that remains is a little bit of accurate technique for Fabi, which is, of course, as we know, never all that easy, especially in these high-pressure situations.
Yeah, but he has such a comfortable situation that it's not like he has to find the super move, and if not, then his advantage disappears. Yeah, it feels like it's more of a question. Black needs a miracle to survive. I even don't see what happens if White just takes and goes king h2 and rook g1, the moves that you mentioned. How will Black then survive in the long run? But if White can find, of course, some forced tactical ways to finish the game even earlier. One thing I would like to ask you, because the computer was mentioning this g takes f4, knight takes f4, rook takes a5 idea. What happens if Black just moves the bishop from a7 to b6? Because I'm not really understanding it.
Could it be d takes e5?
Yes, but then it's some incredible beauty that we have to highlight and show our audience.
Let's bring up an analysis board because just for context, what we are calculating here, you recapture the knight and you play the move rook takes a5. And Peter, you're asking, what if the positioning of the rook is decided by the move bishop b6? And now, what if White ignores the threat on both rooks and plays d takes e5? But it's not the end of the story in this position, because White is threatening queen g4, queen g7, but Black can involve the queen in the defense with the move f6. And I suppose that the easiest way forward is just a cold-blooded rook e1 to c1. Black cannot sit on 2 chairs. Either he takes the rook and gets mated, or he plays the move f6 and allows White the extra tempo to save the rook with a decisive just domination of the pieces.
Yes, basically you gave me the answer. Thank you very much. I sensed that bishop b6 d5 should be the answer, but I felt that it's kind of fair that we address it.
For sure, for sure. Yeah, bishop b6 has to be calculated because if white is forced to trade rooks, then black can breathe a little bit easier. Fabi spoiled for choice, but this is looking like Gray is at death's door here.
Yeah, I mean, Fabi in fantastic control. And the point after rook takes a5 is that white is even setting rook e1 to a1, just a quiet little move, pinning that bishop completely and then just winning on the spot.
Incredible. Just the attack on all sides of the board. It's such an instructive lesson in not tunnel visioning the side of the board where you think you're attacking. You have to look at all of your opponent's weak points. The bishop on a7 is a vulnerable piece, which means you have to pay attention to it and at times switch from the side of the board that you're attacking on to a completely different strategy on the other side. Okay, Fabi is very likely to win this game. We will bring you updates as they come in. I will point out that Hikaru Nakamura has offered a queen trade, and I don't want to call it an implicit draw offer, but I really feel like that game is heading quickly in the direction of a draw.
Yeah, it was already kind of obvious after this e takes f5 move that the players probably believe they also had enough adventures. And wow, this is the update on the Maghsoodloo versus Ivanchuk Duda game. Is Duda escaping his pawn down, but he has all the chances if that king gets to e6. I think he should be able to make a draw.
Well, I have an incredible piece of news. If we rewind 8 moves to the critical moment that we were discussing,
wow,
he found one of the 2 narrow paths that give him excellent drawing chances, and it was the harder one. It was rook f7 and then bang, d3 in order to vacate an escape square for his bishop so that he can keep the e5 square protected. So yes, he gives up a pawn, but he's able to force mass liquidation, get his king into position where it can harass the white rook, and once the rook drops down to f3, he starts harassing the weak pawn on e5. And what an excellent and instructive move. g5, slicing off the coordination between white's pawns. Look at these pawns on c5 and g5, how both of them are operating in concert to isolate the e5 pawn. Now he's bringing his king toward the center, and I think that Maghsoodloo's winning chances are totally circumscribed here by Duda's excellent defensive play.
Absolutely. I mean, unbelievable defense by Duda. He's done to 3.5 minutes, so basically it took all his power, all his energy, all his time to find all this, but it's truly impressive, and I believe that now they are reaching time control. Yes, it's only one more move before move 40. He will simply save this game, and it will be so important. He stays in the match, he will get the tiebreak, and I think he should also get a lot of confidence out of the way how he handled this difficult situation.
King g3 is played. I think Maghsoodloo is heading straight up for g4 because black's only weakness, objectively, is this pawn on g5, which is isolated. So after king e6, king g4, will Duda simply play rook e8 to g8? Normally, you're advised against this kind of passive defense, but the problem is that white's rook is just as passive, and white's rook is just as tied down to the e5 pawn. So you almost reach this kind of impasse where white doesn't have any clear way to make progress.
Yeah, I also feel that, I mean, the very natural move would be king e6, king g4, and rook f8. Yeah, it's like the typical way of trying to counterattack your opponent. But I'm not sure that that move is really desired, because as you highlighted, that the rook g8 move could actually make the work perfectly. Because yeah, exactly, here white plays the move rook e2, and suddenly we have to show this because it's just one tempo that we lost. Rook g8, rook c2 comes, and after b6 white plays b4. I guess yes. And what you mentioned, that the pawn c5 and g5 were beautifully locking down white's position, not being able to reinforce the pawn on d4, and suddenly with this pawn sacrifice, white gets the chance to do that.
And this is out of the question. Once you get the connected passers, you can drive the king up to f5 and even sacrifice the d4 pawn to promote e6. And we've reached the moment of truth, and it comes at the perfect opportunity, the perfect time, that is, for Ivanchuk Duda This almost never happens, Peter, where you make move 40 and then you have the critical decision. It's always the other way around. It's always move 39 or move 40 when you seem to have the most important decision. Here, Duda gets lucky. He gets that additional 30 minutes with which to work, and I think he's going to use that. No, he's already played Rook F8.
No. Yes, I mean, Rook F8 was so tempting.
Oh, and
F3, okay.
Oh my
yes,
gosh.
gives back. Yeah, gives back the tempo. But I mean, this Rook E2, Rook C2 was, and B4, one of the most stunning ideas that I have ever seen in a Rook endgame, because this looks like it's so draw, and basically the move Rook F8 shows the confidence from Duda's side that he believes that I don't need move 40, I don't have to think about this position, it's already elemental draw, I have done brilliant defense. But he gets extremely lucky that Parham did not sense the momentum and did not use this chance with Rook E2.
To me, the B4 idea is the most difficult because, okay, Rook E2, Rook C2, maybe you think about because the pawn on C5 is hanging, right? But you see the move B6 and you think, okay, that's it. Like, why would I get my Rook to C2 just to bite on granite? But this incredible pawn breakthrough, B4 deflecting the C pawn and then defending E5, such an intricate and nuanced idea comes out of nowhere. So totally forgivable. Okay, F3, and now he will have to go Rook G8 because you definitely don't want to go Rook F5. As tempting as it is, the problem is that you're not threatening to play Rook takes E5. And you're giving White the opportunity to run the king up potentially to G6 when Black essentially will run out of pawn moves on the queen side and I think end up in some sort of zugzwang. If we compare this to the same position here, Black this time has the F5 square for the king. And that is the point. The Rook on F5 was hogging prime real estate that needs to be allocated to Black's king.
Yeah, and now we already perfectly understand why Parham played the move F3. He has foreseen, okay, so my opponent wants to go for active defense with Rook F8. I should try to force him into passive defense, and he's definitely hoping for this Rook F5, King H5, King G6 idea, which is, again, truly stunning. It's a very special endgame with very delicate ideas.
I think we have to go straight from here to the Magnus Carlsen game because we have some major action in Carlsen Keymer. So if I may, let's go to that game. Magnus Carlsen has just played a huge move. He's played it on move 34. Vincent is down below 5 minutes on the clock. And this seems to be the moment of truth. Vincent has piled up on the B3 pawn. He played the move that we were talking about, but Magnus responds with a counter strike in the center. E4, E5, Peter, and we've got more moves being played right now.
Yes, it's a very critical moment. White is breaking in the center. Black will have to play the move Knight F7. It's the only move, but since Vincent had just played the move Knight E6 to D8, I'm kind of confident enough that he's rerouting that knight to F7. Also, he needs to protect, guard that weakness on D6. It's a transformation of, and then the big question, White plays Bishop F4, and what happens next? Yeah, because White keeps the pressure on.
Bishop F4 would be a very nasty move. It would threaten to capture on D6. Look at that knight on D2, which is keeping both of Black's rooks at bay. It's guarding the B3 pawn. Black should also keep tabs on the possibility of flicking in the move A5, A4, which could come with great effect in certain situations. But when do you play that move, and how do you address the pressure on D6? Do you, in fact, play pawn takes C5, which, Peter, is a serious positional concession, but you might have to bite the bullet and make that move?
Yeah, now Vincent opted for Knight F7. It's the more flexible move, depending on the situation, what White is doing. Yeah, because now White is facing a very tough choice. Do I go Bishop F4 and allow Black to capture on E5, or do I first take on D6 and then I go Bishop F4? Yeah, and if White takes E6, CD6 and goes Bishop F4, then I believe it's clear that Black will go for a timely A5, A4 counterplay. And then try to assess this.
Yeah, that has to be calculated by Magnus first and foremost because it is the more forcing line. So let's pull up an analysis board. We've got a little bit of time here. Magnus with 25 minutes. He's going to spend some of it calculating these lines. ED-CD, Bishop F4. Now counter-strike with A4. White plays Bishop takes D6 and Black plays A takes B3. Now the pawn is clearly untouchable for many reasons, one of which is just Bishop A4. The king has to hide beneath the pawn. No, but here there's rook d8, and black wins the game because the rook on d3 is undefended. So Carlsen would have to play this incredibly awkward move. I feel like this is already out of the question. I just can't see him going for this position. Or am I
Exactly,
tossing it away too quickly?
Yeah, no, basically it already means that probably bishop f4 is the right move instead of e takes d6. Magnus cannot let the tension get off, and now the big difference is that if black pushes a4, then white goes e6. This is a very huge and crucial difference.
And e6 is dangerous. Why? Because the knight cannot access the center and has to play this awkward move, knight g5, allowing the bishop to exchange. And that pawn on e6 is now a huge asset for white that is going to cause black major problems in the long run. What does that mean? Well, that probably means, and that's a great point there about keeping flexibility of central options. Black probably has to play d takes e5, Peter, and then find a very accurate response in this position.
Yes, which is always a difficult choice. I mean, breaking up your pawn structure like this with d takes e5, especially in time trouble, is extremely difficult. I'm very convinced that Magnus will play the move bishop f4.
Yep.
It's very much his style. He's so precise in this type of positions, and it will be a very tough choice on Vincent to understand that these d takes e5 or a4 moves are the right choices.
At the same time, I think one of black's biggest trump cards is the pawns on the king side, which we haven't talked about, and they're irrelevant as of yet, but they're both on light squares. And in the future, particularly, let's say, with one pair of rooks off the board, even with both pairs of rooks off the board, especially, these pawns will be very hard for white to protect. Black is going to go bishop d7 and attack them. So that is a major long-term asset that I think will help Vincent make the decision, the difficult decision, to ruin, and as you said, to break up his queenside pawn structure with pawn takes e5. But I think he's got enough time here. I think 4 minutes and 25 seconds is enough time for him to figure these things out.
Well, probably, but still, to me, the difficult point is that this bishop f4, a4, e6 line is very hard to evaluate because black has a takes b3 check, and then probably white simply ignores that pawn with king b2. And even in that position, he just goes for this compensation with this dominant pawn on e6. This is a little bit my worry that Vincent has these two options, which, and yeah, Magnus is about to make a move, yeah, bishop f4 on the board.
Great call. And now the big moment of truth. Will Vincent strike with a4? Will he properly evaluate the power of this passed pawn on e6? And it's not trivial, Peter. I completely agree with you because it seems like that pawn is immobilized, right? Black is easily holding the promotion score. That's not the problem. It's appreciating the long-term activity of that pawn affords, which is the hard part for Vincent.
Yes. And okay, d takes e5, bishop takes e5, rook e8 is kind of a solid way of playing the position, but when you know that you have these long-term weaknesses on c5, c7, and then a5, I'm not exactly sure how natural it is.
By the way, Fabiano Caruana, he's won his game as expected and a lot faster than expected. Ray Robson making another mistake there in acute time pressure, accelerating what was essentially inevitable. We congratulate Fabiano Caruana. He dispatches the American superstar Ray Robson, who had a great run, and he moves on to the 5th stage of the World Cup. Okay, Vincent Keymer down to 3 minutes on his clock. What is he going to do? And d takes e5 is the more forcing option, Peter, which I think also increases its appeal, given that it moves him closer to move 40.
And yes, and he has taken, yes. Bishop takes e5. So this is move 38 or, yes, 37. Yes.
And there is a 4. He refrains from rook to e8, which would have forced a pair of rooks off the board. Instead, he strikes immediately with the move a4. And will Magnus go for the same idea we've been talking about of ignoring the threat of a takes b3, hiding behind the pawn, and banking on the activity of his rooks?
Yes, I think so. Yeah, Magnus immediately goes bishop c3. A takes b3 will be answered by king b2, and white is ready to activate the rook to e7.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, black will have to trade a pair of rooks with rook e8. So a takes b3, king b2, rook e8. It's kind of forced.
3 more moves for Vincent Keymer to play until he gets those 30 minutes added. There's one. But these last 2 moves are very important.
Yeah, one can also see that how tense Vincent is. He understands that this is a critical moment, very important moment that White is threatening to get serious attacking chances against Black's king. That pawn on g7 can be a very weak spot. Look at that marvelous bishop on c3. And that's why I feel like Black needs to trade the rooks with rook e8.
This is move 39, folks. After move 40 is executed, it triggers the addition of 30 minutes. Magnus will get those 30 minutes after he makes his next move, but Vincent has 2 more moves to make. And he understands that rook e8 is basically 2 moves in one, very likely. Because if White takes on e8, then Black will be able to play bishop takes e8 automatically. But it's a hugely committal decision, and what makes it a little scarier to me, Peter, is also this a3 pawn, which I know seems totally irrelevant right now, but the more heavy pieces are gone, the scarier it is, the prospect of White pushing that pawn, because the less resources Black will have to keep that pawn at bay.
Yes. I mean, in long run, and another question, like after rook e8 takes rook d5, yeah, that White gets access to the c5 pawn, can collect the c5 pawn, then at some point, this idea that you mentioned that Black will be able to target that pawn on g4 with a timely bishop d7 will have a very important role in the position or evaluating the position, because if not for that move, White would be just slowly collecting on all the pawns on the queen side.
Yes, and Vincent, 2 minutes on the clock. The tension at an all-time high. The stakes could not be higher. If Vincent holds a draw in this game, he knocks Magnus Carlsen yet again out of the World Cup. He keeps Magnus Carlsen's dream, an elusive fantasy. But Carlsen has succeeded in generating practical chances here, both on the board and on the clock. I'm not seeing too many alternatives to rook e8, Peter, so that would still be my prediction. Maybe Vincent has reservations about trading a pair of rooks, but allowing rook e7 just seems, or even rook e6, rook g6, seems a little bit too scary in acute time pressure.
Exactly. I mean, the only problem that he might, yeah, and he goes for rook e8. Yeah, he had to go rook e8, close the eyes and go, because he only had like 3.5 minutes. He cannot answer all the questions. What will happen after takes, rook d5, White takes on c5, and then White will have bishop b4, knight takes b3 idea, collecting all the pawns on the queen side. You will reach move 40, and you take it from there. You have to make this move. You cannot find all the answers. Besides, Black is also counting on some knight d6 counterplay once the e1 rook is traded off. So it was a very good choice by Vincent.
A wise choice, a choice that will bring him to move 40, because Magnus, with 99% certainty, will capture on e8 and stick that rook on d5. And it's actually a good thing, I think, that Black has these doubled c-pawns, because once White eliminates one of them, the c4 pawn will not be a passer. Black will still have this other one that he can rely on in order to keep White's pawn majority at bay. And indeed, we have the trade on e8. Move 40 has been reached. Magnus with 53 minutes on his clock, and Vincent with 32. He is likely to get up from the board, stretch, go to the bathroom, do all of the things that chess players do when they hit time control. And we have entered the next stage of the game, folks. And as Vincent takes a sip of water and resets himself for what is sure to be a long and arduous task of trying to hold this position, we are going to take this opportunity to go on another short break. When we return, we will update you on Hikaru Nakamura's opposite colored bishop endgame against Prague, on some of the results that are coming in, and on more World Cup action. Do not go anywhere. We will be back with more Game 2 of the 4th round of matchups in just a couple of minutes.
Looking for a new way to learn chess? Meet Dr. Wolf, the ideal chess coach and companion. Play against Dr. Wolf as he explains everything step by step, points out strategic ideas, and alerts you to your mistakes. Train with him and go over your past mistakes until you master them. Choose from over 35 lessons created for all skill levels. No matter your level, everyone could use a coach. Download Learn Chess with Dr. Wolf for Android or iOS devices today.
Players, 206 men and 103 women are here for the 2023 Fide World Cup. It's the premier knockout tournament in over-the-board chess. All of these players have one goal: to become a candidate for the World Championship. Only 3 players in each tournament will earn this distinction. The winners will also earn a combined 160 grand in US dollars. Not bad. Duda, the reigning World Cup winner, is back to try and repeat as champion, a feat no one has ever achieved in this grueling tournament.
And Duda wins the 2021 Fide World Cup. What a performance.
The top seeds in 2023 are Magnus Carlsen and Zhu Wenjun. Neither of them have won a World Cup before. Yes, even Magnus has yet to make it past the semis. It's that tough of a tournament. Still, Carlsen is the favorite in pretty much any tournament he plays. But don't sleep on the rest of this field. Hikaru Nakamura, Fabiano Caruana, Nepomniachtchi. They are all here to try and win their first World Cup. For its part, the women's field boasts 5 world champions. Will one of them take the next step in a return to the throne? In a knockout like this, it is truly anyone's game. Who will come out on top? Who else will qualify for the candidates? What upsets are in store? This is the 2023 Fide World Cup.
Hikaru Nakamura, as we expected, that opposite-colored bishop endgame has just ended in a draw. It was a very high-level game. It was a rich game. It was a complex game with so many interesting nuances. You can see Hikaru Nakamura and Prague, who have just had their handshake. They trade all of the pieces. They move into a dead-drawn opposite-colored bishop endgame, and they agree to a draw. And there we see Hikaru, and now his opponent, the birthday boy Prague, now 18 years old, leaves the playing hall, and the preparations will begin for what promises to be, Peter, a scintillating rapid tiebreak. I'm actually really happy that we're going to get more Prague-Nakamura action tomorrow.
Yeah, absolutely agreed. I mean, I feel the tension is building. Both games had been really fighting. Prague was showing no respect for Hikaru. I mean, I felt like in both games he challenged him immediately. And, well, I mean, I even don't know who is the favorite. I just feel like both are playing extremely well and will be a feast for all of us.
There's nothing like watching two players, both in excellent form, duke it out, and Prague playing with supreme confidence, with such restraint, such maturity, such control. And we will see if he can carry that over to the tiebreak section. Let's check into the ladies section and see how some of the top games are going there. We already have a bunch of results. Polina Shuvalova crushing Teodora Ignatz. And I'd like to focus on two games. This is a crazy time scramble between Tan Zhongyi and Zhu Jiner. They are on move 34. Black is down under 5 minutes. And we've got complete pandemonium on the chessboard.
Yeah, it's so hard to even understand what's going on. According to the computer, the last moves with King E8 and Rook H1 were both mistakes, but the players can be forgiven.
Oh my gosh. Knight to E4 had to be found. This move, what is the idea? There's a mate. Queen G8 check. If Rook F8, then mate in 1. Bishop F8, there is another check. That is the whole point of the move. And look at this mate. Check, check, and now the epaulet mate. Check and mate on B3. How did Tan Zhongyi miss this? Elementary tactics.
Well,
I'm kidding.
I know you are kidding, but actually it's findable, of course, but with all the nerves, and we have also seen in the Magnus game with Vincent, yeah, that sometimes there are these mutual hallucinations that you believe your opponent, and especially when you have little time on the clock, it's so easy. Of course, yeah, Bishop F6 doesn't work because of Queen F4 double attack, and let's not forget White's King on E2 is also not safe at all. So the move that featured in the game, Rook H1, was so tempting, bringing that rook also, yes, bringing that rook into the attack, and the Rook H8 check is some kind of a threat. I'm trying to figure out how does Black defend this position. I mean, how deadly is this Rook H8 threat?
Well, yeah, that determines Black's response, because if Black concludes that the threat is deadly, then F1 equals Queen is a likely response, trying to drag the rook back to F1. Not that F1 is not a scary square, but Rook H8 could be met with Bishop B4 to F8, and I'm actually struggling to figure out how White continues the attack. Of course, now Bishop takes F6 is the immediate threat, and what happens if you move the knight? White takes on E6, and you get more chaos on the board.
Yes, that doesn't look very... I mean, by the way, there is this idea behind F1 check, Rook takes F1, Queen H2 check, with the idea that after Rook F2, we are able to trade queens with Queen H5. Wow. That's very important, but White can actually go King D3 instead of... but then Queen H3 check. Okay, that's lovely.
Oh, and you hit the rook, so you cannot zigzag to C4. You have to drag back the king, and now Queen H5 check, or repeat moves. This should be a draw. What an idea. F1 queen to lure the rook away from H1, and then the zigzag pattern for the queen. Now, white could take with the king. That actually has to be factored in because the rook is pinned. Oh, but knight e4 check? Okay, and
Yes.
yeah, that's it. King e1, queen g3, and king e2, knight g3 check.
Yeah, I mean, okay, king takes f1 is kind of suicidal.
Yeah.
But black has only 2.5 minutes on the clock. I do have tremendous respect for Georgine. I know that she's a very hard worker. She's a very strong player. And she has to navigate. She has to navigate these very difficult muddy waters here.
Indeed, she does. And the other crazy game that we have in the women's section, Bella Hotenashvili against Hampi Canero, even more of a crazy time scramble. Bella Hotenashvili has to win on demand, but it appears...
No, it's Hampi Canero who needs to win on demand. Pardon
My bad. Yeah, absolutely. You're absolutely right. Hampi Canero losing that disastrous game yesterday with the white pieces. She has to win on demand with black, and she is knocking on the door of doing just that.
Yeah, unbelievable. I mean, showing her class. That game yesterday was a complete off day. I think she was really ashamed of herself because she put such high standards on herself. Yeah, she is a fantastic player. What happened in that opening we witnessed yesterday, but now she does everything right. It looks like queen f3, threatening queen g2 check, so probably white will have to play rook cd1, threatening rook d8, contemplating ideas herself. But queen g2 check and taking on g1, taking on f2. I mean, if this is not winning, then what? Ah, no, you have knight f1 after check. Yes. Okay.
And it's far from easy because you can stop the mate threats with rook f8, but white ties the rook down with rook d8. And hey, try winning this. There is no forced win here with black. I think that's what Hampi has to realize with her last seconds, which are ticking down. And she has to play a slow move like e4 with the idea of e3 to undermine the f2 pawn. This is actually the cleanest win because it also poses the threat of knight d3 check, which would intercept the connection between the rooks. But she's under a minute. She knows the stakes that are involved. Can she keep her composure and find a couple more accurate moves to pull off an incredible victory on demand?
Yeah, it's a very tough situation because white is actually threatening rook cd1 anyway and going for rook d8 counterplay with just a couple of seconds. The point is that you really feel like queen f3 on the board, that queen f3 should win the game on the spot. So it's very annoying, yeah, when you realize that actually this king e1, knight f1 defense still exists for white, and there is 10 moves to be played before the time scramble will be over.
Wow, this is insanity. This is a bullet game that they're going to be playing for the next 10 seconds, which of course is to my liking, but it's not necessarily to the players' liking. And this is the moment of truth. You can throw in the check on g2, but first and foremost, Hampi has to find rook a8 to f8, bringing the rook to a defended square. You do not want to go rook to e8, because after rook to d8, the rook is not on a defended square. That knight on h7 is the unsung hero of black's entire construction.
Yes. I mean, queen g2 check or rook f8, it depends which move order you want to. Rook f8 feels a bit more flexible. Yeah, you know that queen g2 is still in your pocket. And,
indeed.
And down to 20 seconds.
And rook f8 on the board, cold-blooded by Hampi Canero. She is so experienced. And she finds yet another accurate move. And if I'm Bella Hotenashvili, I'm going rook d8 instantly here. Try to keep the pressure on black's clock. Every second is golden because black is using the time that white is spending to think to try to generate the winning idea, which of course is e4, e3.
Yes, and in this regard also it's kind of very nice not to give that check on g2 because e5, e4 and then e3 idea is probably so much easier to discover here. But still you have to calculate, yeah, because anyway, rook takes f8, knight f8, rook d8 will be played.
And I guess it's all about timing. Knight f4 can drop back to e6, connecting with the knight on f8, hitting the rook. And if your pawn is already on e4, then I think white will not be able to stop the move e3. Hampi has gone e4. She is finding all of the moves and doing it quickly and confidently.
Yeah, very impressive play. I mean, coming back with the black pieces against someone strong as It's very tough, and she's pulling off. And now I feel like after e5, e4, this was like the critical key move, yeah, because it's a quiet move. The rest of the moves probably are already much easier to find.
That's exactly right. And especially if white plays rook takes f8 check, it may seem insignificant, but that's an additional 30 seconds that black gets by taking on f8 immediately. And, you know, every second is golden here. Rook d8 will be met with knight e6. I completely agree. I think the hardest part is over. Right now, it's just about maintaining her concentration and finding one or two more accurate moves. Rook d8.
I mean, I'm not even sure that black is not able to go for queen g2, queen g1 checkmate, but knight f4 to e6 is the professional move.
But that's a big mistake, actually, because white can sack the exchange
and go queen h4
with a crazy mating sequence. Knight e4, knight f6 will force black's hand. Whoa.
Wow. So some more surprises, yes. I mean, rook f8, knight f8, queen h4, e3 is met by knight gc to e4. Unbelievable defense.
And she misses it. She's gone rook d2. She's gone rook d2. But here's the thing. Does black play e3 here? Not so clear. e3, rook e2. And if you play e takes f2, the knight again can jump into e4.
Yes.
Whoa. The best move is knight f4, repeating the position. But if Humpy missed that first sequence, then it's unlikely she suddenly figures it out the second time around.
Yeah, because I was trying to understand how easy is this queen g2, queen g1, and then you start knight d3 and the white king runs away, you collect everything. But you have the feeling that if white's king runs away, then the f8 knight will be in terrible problems. But according to computer, this just wins for black. Easy to say, but with 30 seconds on the clock, very difficult to keep a calm head to calculate those lines.
There's nerves all around, and you know, 1 minute sounds like a long time, but when you watch your clock tick down, that's all that you can think about. Okay, big moment here for Humpy. I think she's likely to play e3. If she's not going knight f4 and repeating, I don't see another helpful move. I mean, you could go a4 and just make a waiting move, but I think we likely will see e3, rook e2, and she's got to keep a clear head in those ensuing complications. I'm starting to get worried that she might be losing her way a little bit with 5 more moves to play until time control.
Yeah, maybe she even has to repeat now with knight f4 just to get the 30 seconds.
And repeat she does. Can she find queen g2 the second time around?
Or will she just repeat and then go for e3? Yeah, those are the options.
Well, Hotanashvili needs to go rook d8. She needs to do it fast.
Yeah, because if she signals that something is wrong, that can help Humpy make up her mind.
Not sure what she's pondering here. There literally are no other moves. There she goes. Rook d8 is on the board. Humpy needs to win this game in order to force the tiebreak. A repetition of moves is out of the question. That also helps, I think, because that will prime her to look at other moves more seriously. I think she might see it. I think she might go queen g2. And if she plays queen g2, then I think she will see queen g1 and knight d3. And she's done it.
Yeah, she has done it. She had to do it.
But now another big moment. Can she find queen g1, which is the only winning move?
Exactly. I mean, it's basically understandable that if the white king runs away, then it's much better to provoke that knight to f1.
Mm-hmm.
And the point is that after queen g1 check, king d2, queen takes f2, if the king runs away to c3, black collects on g3 with check and then protects with the knight back on e6. So that's why white has to play the move knight f1. All eyes on Humpy.
Knight to d3. 7. 3.
She needs to.
And she's done queen g1. And will she find the final nail in the coffin? Knight d3 wins the game because it drives the white king out into the open where it can be checkmated, and she has done it.
She has done it, yes. I mean, the good news is that she will spot that she has queen c5 check against king c3, and white has very big trouble finding a good square for the king, because if king b3, then queen b6 checks the rook,
Oh,
And anyway, you are reaching time control. You see that everything is under control, and then you can quietly already calculate the finishing touches.
I think it's safe to say that having found this line, in fact, the move repetition worked in Humpy's favor because it brought her closer to the time control. She is knocking on the door of winning on demand with black. At this point, she's found all the hard moves. She just has to collect the pawn on f2 with check and essentially collect the rest of white's pieces. I think this affords us a good opportunity to go back to the open section. The intrigue in this game is basically over. Time control will be made, and Humpy will have plenty of time to figure out the rest of the winning process. Okay, we still have so many games remaining in the open section. We had crazy things happen in the Duda Maghsoodloo game. Lots of mutual mistakes, but finally that game seems to be settling it down into a draw. I just want to highlight some of the opportunities which were missed as the players are starting to repeat moves. Peter, crazy stuff. After rook f8, f3, Duda did in fact fall for the saccharine nectar of the move rook f5, and Parham did not go king h5. He responded
Wow.
instantly, once again, with a very sloppy a4.
And after b6, he just played rook e4, and yeah, okay, now it's gonna be draw.
Yep, king h5. One last opportunity there to generate excellent winning chances. Instead, you get a full liquidation. Duda finally recovers the pawn, and we are going to get a draw momentarily.
Yeah, but basically this brings us that after a4, b6, king h5, according to computer, was a draw. And then we have to understand that why was king h5 a win? Yeah, if we already talk about this.
Absolutely. So we're comparing this position and this position. Let's assume that black does nothing. Black plays b6.
Yes.
Oh, I think it has something to do with Zugzwang
Wow.
because the computer wants to shuffle between g4 and h5.
Unbelievable.
Look at this, h5.
And now
Oh,
b4. Yes.
and that is the reason. Now we compare this to the inclusion of the moves a4 and b6. If you try to do the same thing here, g4, b5 takes. If you play b4 in this position, there is rook takes c5. And the pawn endgame is losing for white because black will promote the b pawn.
Wow. I mean, okay, this is completely insane. Yeah, it's like a study. And if somebody tells you at home, yeah, if somebody tells you at home that, you know, this is a study, black to move or white to move, and you have to try to understand what happens, then of course these players will not with ease because these lines are so difficult, but finally they will of course understand. But during the game, nobody tells you that this is a very critical moment, this is a study-like position, and there are mystical Zugzwang positions and whatever. You just believe your instinct that, aha, already my opponent played good, he made a brilliant defense. Yes, the game is concluding with a logical drawish outcome, but yes, incredible, truly stunning.
What an idea. You literally shuffle between these two squares, waiting for black to exhaust his pawn moves, and the moment black plays b5, it triggers the pawn sacrifice b4, which we've talked about previously. Of course, black can't move the rook because he gives up g5. Black can't go g4. That doesn't help. White simply takes on g4. Black can't move the king because white keeps shifting the e-pawn further and further up, tying black more and more down. We forgive officially Parham Maghsoodloo for missing this incredible resource. What an instructive endgame. But long story short, we are going to get a draw in this game. And I think this probably gives us a good opportunity to switch back to our top marquee matchup between Carlsen and Vincent Keymer.
Yes, because all eyes on Vincent, that how he will handle the situation. He did play the best bishop c6, bishop d7 idea. There was also nothing else he really could do. The problem is that, nevertheless, he's making everything right. The position is still unpleasant after bishop takes g4, which is so natural. Why don't you take the pawn? First of all, the pawn on h5 is protected by the rook on c5. This rook on c5 is doing an excellent job guarding the h5 pawn, keeping the c4 pawn under control and targeting the weakness on c7. And the idea that you mentioned half an hour ago, that white eventually will start moving that a pawn up on the board, a4, a5, once the bishop leaves the diagonal.
Yeah, that's exactly what Magnus is putting into practice. The move Vincent has to figure out is bishop takes g4. And assessing the danger level of that A pawn is incredibly difficult. But if I face this against Magnus, Peter, I would be very disinclined to move the bishop away from d7. I would be a little bit too scared of the rapid advance of that A pawn. But the question remains, if you're not taking on g4, well, then what are you doing? Because the knight has no prospects. The bishop remains on d7. Do you play a waiting move? Vincent might take on g4 because he's got not much else to do. And he just did. He's taken on g4.
Yes, he had to, and we also see he invested quite a lot of time. He spent basically almost 12-13 minutes, yeah, and Magnus immediately pushes the pawn to a4. And all eyes on Vincent now. He has to understand how to activate the pieces. He already used one time the knight e6, d8, f7 route. Now probably he has to reshuffle that knight from f7 to e6, kicking away that rook on c5 and the bishop on d4. And it requires very precise calculation.
Knight f7 to d8. What a difficult move with the aim of shifting the knight over to e6, harassing the rook and the bishop, which are on vulnerable attackable squares. So what exactly happens after knight to d8? Will Carlsen ignore the threats and play a5? Or do you think he will address the awkward positioning of his rook and bishop?
I think he will move the bishop back to e3 just to get out of the range. No, Vincent goes knight g5, but it's the same idea. The knight lands on e6. It's exactly the same idea.
It keeps
Yeah, sometimes we have some technical problem.
There we go.
Yes. Okay, perfect. Yes. So basically the line bishop e3, knight e6 is very similar. It's almost identical, I would say. Yeah, Magnus immediately goes bishop e3.
Great call.
Knight e6 will be blitzed out. And then the question, where does Magnus put his rook? Rook d5 looks like the most natural square.
Yes, I think rook d5. There is maybe an argument for rook e5, but something about that move feels a lot more awkward.
Yes, I mean, okay, one could argue that that puts everything on dark squares, and why shouldn't white be happy placing everything on dark square? But rook on d5 is nevertheless an open file, and black never really wants to play c6 because that would weaken the d6 square. So that's why this rook d5 move looks very tempting.
Indeed, it does. And after rook d5, knight e6, rook d5, what is black's defensive construction? Because white has this massive threat of a5, a6, and once the pawn reaches a7, I don't want to say that the game is over. Black can keep the promotion square at bay, but once the white knight gets into the game via b3, it feels like the game will start shifting momentously, precipitously in white's favor. So how does Vincent use the two tempi that he has in order to set up his defenses after knight e6, rook d5?
Yeah, it's a very big question. I mean, we also see that Vincent is getting quite nervous. The time control is very tricky. After move 40, it feels like, yes, I just reached the time control and I have all the time in the world to start defending this position. No, here the players only have 30 minutes till the end of the game. And when you have to defend such a tough endgame, I'm really believing that Magnus feels that he gets a hang on. But after knight g5, black has the chance of capturing the pawn on h5. This is maybe this was the reason why Vincent opted for knight g5, not knight d8.
Let's explore. Bishop takes h5, and this is nothing to sneeze at. This gives black a massive asset on the king side, connected passers. Now, obviously, white will not take on g5. That is out of the question. White needs his bishop in order to roll out the red carpet for the pawn. Carlsen will play a5. But what now with a6 and then a potential rook takes g5, a massive threat? How does Vincent use his rook in the most aggressive and active possible manner?
Yeah, very tough. I mean, basically, once you see that this pawn is advancing and you have trouble holding it, the bishop on e3 is beautifully supporting that advance. I feel like, the reason why I did not even notice that the pawn on h5 was hanging was the fact that I had too much respect for this a pawn, yeah? So I wanted to get as close as possible with my pieces. However, the call and the question that you gave me after knight e6, rook d5, that what next, was a very tough question to answer.
I'll just add that the computer move here is not only is it inhuman, that's like by definition, but it's aggressively inhuman. It's rook b7 to b4. And I don't understand this move from any perspective. The point is that after king a3, now you drop back to b8. And after knight takes b3, you find bishop to d1. And I still don't understand the idea until you realize that after knight d2, somehow black shuffles his pieces. This is what I would classify as completely irrational computer play. And when you look at these lines, it's so important to realize that there's no way that even half of them will be carried out on the chessboard. So I feel like that will guide Vincent in the direction of the more natural knight e6. But we keep coming back to this scenario. And a5, a6, and a7, Peter, is such a nasty threat.
Yes, and very simple play for white. One could argue that, yes, the same idea, this rook b4, exists also here, but I mean, this rook b4 is so mysterious, you don't really understand the benefit, because white can simply play the move king a3, sidestepping the pin and follow it up with knight takes b3. I mean, I understand why Vincent is burning all his time, and it's very tough. He defended extremely well. Basically, I think one cannot really say that where was the mistake, but still he is facing very serious practical problems.
And the problems are escalating with every ticking second, because he's now got 11 minutes for the rest of the game. And, you know, Magnus's A-pawn has only started its journey forward. So it is understandable that Vincent wants to find the ideal setup. He wants to stop the progression of the pawn, but his pieces have no purchase in the center. It's unclear where to put the knight, where to put the bishop. And the knight is so nicely restricted along the dark squares by white's bishop. It can't really join the defense, and neither can black's bishop, because f3 is controlled. If you go to e2, then there's the c4 pawn that you're just staring at. So it's basically all down to if Vincent can use his rook in the correct manner, but even that is incredibly hard to do.
Yeah, and we have to appreciate, we haven't talked about this wonderful stabilizing knight on d2, because actually this is the soul of white's position, making sure that black is not able to jump actively with knight e4. The knight on d2 takes care of the b pawn. That's why white can even afford himself after rook b4 to play moves like king a3. Finally, that knight is at the right moment ready to capture the pawn on b3. There is some incredible harmony in white's position, and this is what drives Vincent completely crazy.
And this is what drives, I feel like, everybody crazy when they encounter any such endgame against Magnus Carlsen. His pieces are in the right place, at the right time, on the right square, and somehow everything randomly seems to come together. Of course, it is far from random. This is the endgame virtuoso himself. And this is the meaning of virtuosity. You don't even realize how everything comes together in a perfect symphony until it does. And by that point, as you're burning your clock, you realize that it might be too late. And I think it's safe to say that Vincent is in trouble, and he is trying to solve his problems concretely with the move knight to f3.
Wow, yeah, so he basically got fed up of this knight on d2. Yeah, we started praising that knight. Yeah, Vincent also felt like, I have to get rid of this knight. Now, of course, white can keep on pushing that a pawn, but then at least the good news is that black eliminates that knight on d2. Or is there any chance that he wants to play knight e1, knight d3 check? I don't believe, but at least I had to mention this idea.
And no, I think that idea is a major factor that will determine Magnus's decision. And Magnus's decision, I think, is between two moves. Either you trade on f3 and play a5, or you play the immediate e5. First impression is that white should take on f3 because the bishop on e3 is an integral cog in the machine. Why? Because when the pawn reaches a7, you definitely want the bishop on this diagonal to permanently protect that pawn.
Yes, that's true. On the other hand, after knight takes f3, bishop f3, black also feels like he has gained something because the bishop is already on the long diagonal protecting the a8 square. And without the knights, actually this a pawn doesn't look that frightening anymore. Of course, if white gets the pawn all the way to a7, and it will be a protected passer that will just decide the game, but it does feel that it will give black some chances to somehow easier deal with that very dangerous pawn.
I really like this decision by Vincent, though. I think, given his time situation, something that makes the position more concrete and a little bit easier to play is the most practical decision he can make right now. And you're right, somehow intuitively, it feels like after the knights are off the board, not only is the A pawn a little bit less scary, but then the king actually is stuck on the B2 square. You can never really go king A2. And it does feel like black's B pawn becomes a more menacing counterweight to its vis-a-vis on A4.
Yes, and look at the body language somehow, so that Vincent finds this move knight f3. He looks around, he looks at Magnus. I think Magnus is also very upset that Vincent found this move. It's practically such an important move. The white knight on d2 had to be destabilized. And also knowing that Magnus needs to win this game at all cost, any trade actually definitely favors the defensive side. Talking about defenses, after knight takes f3, bishop takes f3, a5, the idea that we already have seen a couple of times with rook b4, rook a4, is that the idea, or how do we plan to stop that a pawn?
Well, let's make the moves on the board. Knight takes f3, bishop takes f3, a5. This is likely one of the key positions that Magnus Carlsen is wrestling with. And indeed, I think the correct move, and the only move perhaps, is rook to b4. And it should be pointed out that rook b4 looks like a blunder. Looks like you're giving up the c7 pawn, but it is much more important to put the rook behind white's passer, as we are advised to do in the endgame, than it is to keep that measly c7 pawn on the board. And what's beautiful about black's construction is that the bishop slides into d1, and it is the b3 pawn that might be the saving grace at the end of the day. If white blindly pushes his pawns, well, he's obviously going to lose the game. Black's going to give this devastating check on a2 and then start pushing the b pawn forward. What does that mean? Well, that likely means that Magnus Carlsen will have to attend to the threat of rook a4 and maybe keep his rook on c5 so that rook a4 can be met with king takes b3. So maybe bishop d2 is the more annoying practical chance for Magnus, Peter. I think this might be what he relies on.
Yes, definitely. Rook a4, king takes b3, bishop d1 check, king c3. And black has made all these fantastic defensive moves, and the position is still critical. It's very unpleasant. I believe we're gonna see this, but in order to be able to play the move knight f3, Vincent had to force a rook b4. Otherwise, knight f3 is simply not an option.
What happens if you don't play rook b4? Can we show to people how bad it becomes? Let's say you play a nonchalant move like king f7. Definitely very nonchalant. It blunders the bishop. No, there's literally no other move. I mean, the only other option is to wait, and this just allows a6, which is completely out of the question. So you're right. Rook b4 had to have been foreseen, which is pretty impressive, I think, to see this move, to understand that you can abandon the c-pawn. And he also had to have seen this bishop f3 to d1 defense. So a great amount of thinking, deep thinking, was done by Vincent in that moment. But now he has to follow up with ultra-accurate play with less than 10 minutes on his clock.
Yeah, from the body language, I'm getting the feeling like Vincent is kind of relieved that he find this knight f3 idea. However, it's obvious that Magnus will find the antidote. Yeah, and Magnus will not let the game to be easily defensive.
But try this on for size. I think the appeal of a5 in light of the line we just calculated is that after the exchange on d2, white controls the b4 square.
Yes, but then you don't hit the a7 square, yeah? Then suddenly black gets other options, yeah? Like activating the bishop maybe to somewhere. I don't know exactly where, but it's a very tough position.
So undefined. It's so hard to calculate anything here for both colors. I think a lot of the decision making is done intuitively. But of course, Magnus, I think, is probably focusing his efforts on this rook b4 line. This seems to be the only forcing line within the entire ecosystem of this endgame.
Yes. And it's so difficult. And the line that we just talked about, where I said that I still feel like it will be very difficult for Vincent to hold, that position is also appealing for white. On the other hand, Magnus might want to get already more out of the position. That's another question, because he feels the pressure that he needs to win this game. It's never so easy to keep a calm head, understanding every single finesse.
Without question. And we would like to update people on some results that have been coming in. Vidit managed to draw that insane position against Etienne Bacro. And because he won yesterday's game, he advances to the next round. First, he defeats Matthias Blubaum in that scintillating Armageddon. Now he holds off Etienne Bacro and makes it to the 5th round. Nihal and Nepo drew. We talked about that. Very likely Yesipenko and Gukesh will draw, although their endgame is actually incredibly sharp. And Ferenc Berkish, his position against Ruslan Ponomarev, I had a bit of a hard time evaluating it, but I think that will be a draw. And Erigaisi will likely beat Sindarov.
I think that because now Magnus is taking his time, and we already kind of covered it, we can just very quickly go over the possibilities. Yes, Arjun is just winning. I mean, this is an element of winning Rook endgame. No need to worry for the Indian chess fans. He will win this.
So just give a check on f3, push the king away, and then slide the king back and start pushing the c-pawn.
Exactly.
Is there anything else to talk about here, or is it just cut and dry, resignable?
I mean, the only idea Black has is Rook a1, Rook g1, Rook g3. The only possibility to go for counterplay, but then the white king can easily protect that Rook on e3, for example, with king e4, and the c-pawn is already advancing and white just wins. So we can move on to the Gukesh game, I believe.
Yes.
Let's take a look.
Well, Black has been pressing in this game for a while now, which is incredible. And Esipenko overpressed. He pushed c5, which is a move we talked about many moons ago, and he ended up losing that pawn. So his strategy backfired.
Yeah, his strategy backfired, and it's always very unpleasant to be on the defensive side. Black is starting to go king d3, creating mating sets against white's king on d1. I mean, practically speaking, white needs, I would not say a miracle, because we do see the computer evaluation that apparently it's somehow holdable, but first you have to believe that you can hold it, because it's so scary.
I mean, king d3 makes so much noise. I think it's worth seeing exactly how the move works. Like, let's say white plays rook takes g7, black plays king d3. Okay, so what happens? If bishop e1, then you get checkmated on a1. I think the only move here is bishop to c1. And very important detail, black actually has the time to play rook takes a6, and has to play rook takes a6 to eliminate white's biggest source of counterplay. And after rook takes g6, rook a1, this illustrates just how bad the situation is for white. You cannot stop the check on e3, which will isolate the bishop from the king, and white is clearly not even close to fast enough with the h-pawn. So this is the issue. How on earth does white address it?
Yeah, very difficult. I mean, when the natural moves are not possible, and computers say some mysterious defensive moves are possible and maybe it's not so bad, those are the things that are almost impossible to find over the board, because the players are basically navigating through emotions. They have instincts, they have reflexes, and you know exactly that with black, you feel that it has to be winning. I'm coming with all my pieces. There is no way that this king on d1 and bishop on d2 construction can really hold on. And it's very bad news that white is unable to take on g7 and then create a counterplay with the h-pawn because of the lines that you illustrated. It's very tough. I don't really understand how to... Okay, maybe white just plays h5, closes the eyes, and says like king d3, bishop c1, that's the computer kind of defense, and realize that maybe I will lose this bishop, but let me run away with the king at some point. Rook d7 is a defensive idea. This is the key.
Ah, that is the key. It ties down the knight, forces the black king over to c4. Now you have the time to take on g7 and make the draw. And amazingly, black has no... Well, black can swing over to the other side.
Yes,
but
and
now
this
white
is
closes his
exactly.
eyes.
White gives the bishop king e1, rook h1 check, king f2, rook takes e1, and then relies on the fact that he has two incredible passers.
And this should be a draw. Even intuitively, there's no way. In fact, I would go so far as to say black has to be careful at this point.
Yes, you have to watch out.
Like, black has to stop the h-pawn with his rook and the a-pawn with his knight, but white starts pursuing the knight. Clearly, here Gukesh or here Esipenko would be out of the woods. The other defense is to start with bishop c1, to make a prophylactic move, get the bishop out of the line of fire of black's king. And again, the idea is one and the same. King d3 is met with rook d7, and it forces the king back. So Andre has to not lose hope here. He has to realize that he can use this idea of rook d7 in order to provide an antidote to the devastating idea of king d3.
Yeah, but still, even if he discovers all this, it will still be very difficult because Black will always find some way to ask some new questions. So, okay, Gukesh is pressing. Just very quickly, an update on the Berkesh game. How does that position stand
Yes. Let
against
me
Ponomaryov?
pull that game up. I think it is a draw. I think Berkesh is knocking on the door of a draw, and I'm not seeing Ruslan Ponomaryov win this game because he's going to likely lose his a-pawn, and with the a-pawn, he will lose all of his winning chances. But Berkesh still needs to get to that pawn.
Yeah, well, I think he will, yeah, because a4, king a3 very much is within reach, and the pawn on g5 might fall. However, then Black always gets the e6 square for his bishop. So I agree with your call that it should be a rather easy draw.
Why not bishop f5, rook takes g5, bishop e6?
But hang on, there is, just to highlight the construction, that eventually if Black goes a4 and king a3, White captures on g5, White's king marches to c3, then after bishop takes a2, rook g1, rook a1 could be somewhere stalemate, but you have king c2. Can we just highlight that position because it's very important?
A4 is on the board, so I can just use this move as a segue into highlighting this line. So what we want is a situation, and I'm just setting it up in general, right?
Yes.
So basically bishop e6, this is likely to happen, but what you're talking about is this type of situation. And here White is actually winning in this position.
Exactly, yes. I mean, it's stunning. Yeah, bishop b3, rook a1 check, bishop a2, king c2. So this is the danger that caught my eye. And that's why I feel like White will not capture on g5. He will try to bring that king closer. Yeah, so not to give the bishop e6 idea. For example, after a4, king d2. Yeah, and it would be very natural for Black to play king a3. Then I'm playing rook takes g5, bishop e6, king c3, and probably it's very important that the king takes the pawn.
Incredible. We actually reached that position. Yeah, bishop takes a2, rook g1. That's a great find. And you have to find king takes a2. But now it's a dead draw. You stick your bishop probably on b3. In fact, the king is in the correct corner, which is very important. It's in the corner opposite to the color of your bishop. That is the most famous piece of advice that one can share when dealing with a bishop versus a rook scenario.
Yes, so basically it looks like it's a draw, but still a little bit nerve-wracking situation for Berkesh and for all the Hungarian fans. But I think Berkesh is a fantastic endgame player, so I cannot really imagine him not navigating this to a draw.
And he's got so much time. He's got 15 minutes on the clock, which is more than enough to calculate these lines out. They're pretty forcing, and they're pretty clearly defined. Okay, what else do we have? We've got Vokatura Salem.
Yes, let's check out on that game because it's very important for both players.
Okay. Looks pretty balanced first. No, looks actually maybe slightly better for Black. White's king might be in a fair bit of trouble here with all these pawns really overextended and some of these light squares around White's king looking really airy.
Yes, the pawn on a5 is a weakness. The king on g1 is kind of shaky with the pawn on f4, which had to guard the e5 pawn. I feel like, practically speaking, this is hell for White. I mean, it's so difficult to protect against everything.
And Black can throw in the move h4 at the right moment, maybe even now, in order to disrupt the coordination of White's pawn chain. Then, if White ignores, you could drive the pawn down to h3. That would create long-term mate threats on g2. Ugh, this is yucky, and White has no counterplay on the other side of the board. The rooks are just passive. I'm totally with you here. I think Salem has good winning chances.
Yeah, it's a golden opportunity. I mean, we spoke that whoever qualifies for the 5th round will be incredible achievement for these players. Already reaching round 4, it's sensational. And it looks like Salem has this golden opportunity.
And I think on that note, we can go back to the Magnus game because we've reached the moment of truth in that game, the moment where Vincent Keymer has to find the move rook to b4. And obviously, we are expecting him to see that move. We believe that he played knight f3 with that move in mind, but a nerve-wracking situation like this, it plays tricks on you. And the things that we take for granted, sitting in the comfort of our warm room, Vincent Keymer feels quite a bit differently, sitting there knowing that a draw will mean Magnus Carlsen's exit at his hands. Rook b4, only move, Peter, or is that an exaggeration? I don't think it is. It is an only move.
It is an only move, yeah, because if the black rook has to go passive, yeah, I mean, after a6, rook b8, a7, rook a8, that's equal to resignation. The big question is, how do you, I mean, you have to have this move on your radar, yeah, this rook b4. A computer had already mentioned to us it in couple of shocking moments when we just believe that, no, I mean, okay, it's not on the radar of the human brain, but now already probably it is.
And it's a difficult move to play psychologically because you're giving up the c7 pawn. It's easy for these ghosts to seem a lot scarier than they are. Bishop d4. And, you know, your pawns on the king side are also on dark squares. So it's not like you play rook b4 and everything is clean and nice. It's scary. It's a very scary move to play, but he has to play it. Passive defense is just not going to cut it here in the long run, especially if the pawn reaches a7.
Yeah, and the terrible news for Vincent is that after rook b4, Magnus will just blitz out the move bishop d2. Yeah, so in order to play rook b4, Vincent has to burn a lot of time, a lot of energy calculating rook takes d7. However, for Magnus, he knows exactly that, no, I'm not interested. Yeah, and Vincent is exhausted. I can understand it's a very grueling, big game. Yeah, Magnus is putting the pressure, and after rook b4, bishop d2, rook a4, king takes bc, bishop d1 check, king cc, the position that we had before, it's still so unpleasant.
And he's made a move, and it is rook b4. Wow, Vincent walking on hot coals and doing so successfully. And you're right, bishop d2 is a very practical move by Magnus. And that position still looks incredibly unpleasant. That stem position with the king on c3. Black is kind of at an impasse. And Magnus, he just knows. He knows when to press the gas pedal down. He knows when to put pressure on the opponent's clock. And he doesn't have any choice, right? Bishop d2 is the only way to maintain reasonable winning chances. So his job for the time being is pretty straightforward.
Yeah, he has to keep his chances alive. He has to stabilize the position. After rook a4, king takes b3, bishop d1 check, king c3. He still feels like, I have the a passer. I have this incredible rook on c5, which protects every single white pawn, the a5 pawn, the c4 pawn, the h5 pawn, and also eyes the weakness on c7. And potentially that bishop can, via e3 or f4, get to the long diagonal to d4 or e5. And then rook takes c7, rook takes g7. Eventually will be settling at some point.
Black even has some resources which involve going g7, g5, and yes, allowing the en passant and lifting the king up, trying to take on g6, and creating serious counterplay in the form of a passed pawn. That h5 pawn is exerting a deep freeze over Black's pawn majority, which is so annoying for Vincent. He would like nothing more than for a counterweight to White's far advanced pass pawn on a5, but look at his clock. Every one of his moves is taking him a minute, 2 minutes. It's hard to play fast here for Black because you have so much to keep track of. You need to make sure you're not letting the a pawn through. You need to make sure that you're calculating rook takes c7. And I'm getting worried that his clock is going to get in the way of continued precise defense, and rook a4 is on the board.
Yeah, it's on the board. I mean, he will make all these moves. The only problem is that after king c3, it will be so tough. Yeah, king b3, bishop d1 check. Up till this moment, everything is kind of clear.
Yep.
You have to give the check. King c3.
There it is, and we've reached the critical position. And with 6 minutes on the clock, can Vincent maintain his incredibly high standard of resistance? Bishop e2 came to my mind with the idea of sacking on c4, but White is just in time, Peter. King to d4, and that darn bishop on d2 links itself to the a5 pawn. Black doesn't have this concept of giving away the bishop for White's two queenside pawns.
Exactly. This is what hurts the most. Yeah, because, and one could argue that after bishop e2, king d4, already white is somehow threatening to activate the bishop, and once the bishop goes to f4 and then you take bishop c4, rook c4, rook a5, then bishop e5 covers the fifth rank. Maybe that's also some kind of a defense, but there will be some g6 ideas somewhere, rook a6, g6, so much to calculate. It can be a draw, it can be a direct resignation. You have to be super precise.
And honestly, even if you reach that position, and even if you trade white's remaining pawn, you still will likely have to defend rook and bishop versus rook with your increment. So that will still be incredibly hard after such a long and such an exhausting game. And Vincent has made a move. And it is c6, trying to box in white's rook, using that pawn to control some squares. Obviously, Magnus will not take the pawn and give up his a-pawn. He will probably play king d4, or he will redeploy his rook through the e-file.
Yeah, he's also trying to get his king to f7, yeah, because before rook takes e7 was a check. He's probably preparing king f7, but still it's not clear. Okay, king d4 is a thematic move, yeah? That's the big question. That
he's already played it.
Instantly has played it. And I mean, how do you protect? How do you defend this position? It's just so awkward.
Well, I guess the big thing is bishop f3. Yes, I was going to say Vincent does not want to give up his c-pawn that easily. The downside is that his bishop is now very passive. The other downside, he doesn't have the move king f7 because that walks into a fork with rook f5. So what is Magnus's setup here? I think bishop c3 is a move that Magnus is very likely to play because it targets the g7 pawn and it sets up ideas of infiltrating the 7th rank in the long run.
Yes, it's also a very nice stabilizing move, just stepping out of something and also covering the a1 square, yeah, because at some point maybe black wants to activate that rook from a4 with a tempo on the bishop. And yeah, the big question is, what is the next move? Yeah, so if white plays bishop c3, which is so thematic, how is Vincent planning to... Is bishop d5 an idea? But then rook takes d5 is dangerous, right?
I was exactly thinking about that. Bishop d5, rook d5 has to be assessed. King d3, of course, would step back away from the pin. And Magnus has these two ideas that are so nasty. Once the bishop gets to c3, first idea is to get the rook to the 7th rank and target black's kingside pawns. Second is once the rook moves away from c5, the infiltration of white's king to b6. And obviously the eventual promotion of the a-pawn. And bishop c3 is on the board. Folks, we are going to go on a very short break. And when we come back, we will continue to monitor Vincent Keymer's defensive heroism here. But can he continue to put up this high level of resistance? We will see on the other side of this short break.
Chess Kid is fun. Chess is great for the brain, but it's also fun to play. And Chess Kid makes it easy to have fun. Whether your child is a total beginner or a prodigy, they can hop on and find a well-matched opponent from around the world at any time. Chess Kid is the safe, parent-approved way for your child to play chess online. Chess Kid is educational. To kids, it feels just like playing, but chess is a great way to learn patience, strategy, and critical thinking. Chess Kid features a comprehensive training program that guides kids to level up on their way to mastery. There are more than 50,000 chess puzzles and a whole library of entertaining videos that teach strategies, tactics, openings, and endgames specifically for kids. Chess Kid is easy. Whether you're a parent helping your child, a coach managing dozens of kids, or a school of hundreds. Signing up is free and easy, so what are you waiting for?
We are back here at the World Cup, the decisive moments in Magnus Carlsen's decisive battle against Vincent Keymer. This is game 2 of the 4th round of World Cup matchups. Vincent Keymer stunning Magnus Carlsen yesterday, and he needs to hold a draw in this incredibly difficult opposite colored bishop endgame with rooks. And as we have seen, Vincent's last move, bishop g2, technically, Peter, this is a decisive mistake due to rook f5, but defending this position with 5 minutes on the clock is a task that I don't think even Magnus Carlsen, together with Garry Kasparov, together with Capablanca, could handle.
Exactly. I mean, the point is that bishop g2 is a losing move according to computer. On the other hand, computer's move with bishop e2, which supposedly was the only defense, was humanly not a defense. Yeah, so it's very tough. And Magnus still needs to find that rook f5 move, because the rook on c5 is such a perfect piece. Yeah, it protects everything. I mean, it's not a given that you have the heart even to move that rook away from c5.
And the crazy thing is, after rook f5, black does have this move bishop d5, shutting down the door, and Carlsen has to then calculate rook takes d5. So if he doesn't believe that that exchange sacrifice is winning, then he's not going to play rook f5.
Yes, which means that he might even find some ideas like king e5, king d6, king c7, king b6, the route that you mentioned. If white's king reaches b6, then basically there is no way of holding that a6 pawn. Very tense situation. Clearly Magnus wants to make a quick move, but he also probably learned his lesson from yesterday that you shouldn't be rushing with the 30 seconds increment.
And he's holding himself back here. Of course, if he tries to go immediately with his king, if he plays king e5, Vincent can shift the bishop to f1. And if Vincent can win the c4 pawn, then it's basically a dead draw, because then he breaks through the floodgates and his bishop and his rook combine to hold down the a6 square. And it will be almost impossible for white to continue pushing his pawn. So that's what helps Magnus, I think. The fact that king e5, bishop f1 doesn't look appetizing in the least. And if you're not playing king e5, then you're moving your rook. Well, where are you moving it? Well, probably not to e5, because again, it allows bishop f1. By process of elimination, Peter, I think that might be the easiest way to find the move rook f5.
Yes. And then it comes down that maybe it's a mutual zugzwang position. If it would be black to move and would play here the move bishop f3, then it would be not easy for white to make a move.
And my question is, how hopeless is that position where white sacks the exchange on d5? Maybe while Magnus is thinking, we can pull up an analysis board and take a quick look. The position after rook f5, because I think Vincent, just out of desperation, might want to go for bishop d5. What else is he going to do? Otherwise, he knows that he will not survive this forever. And after rook d5, cd king d5, okay, my instinct is to bring the king up,
f7.
Try to run it immediately to the queen side. Does white push? Does white go king c5 and king b5? This is not easy.
Yeah, not easy. Apparently, both moves are possible. I mean, the c5 move is much more natural. I mean, you just want to push that pawn. But then you also feel that black's king is in time to reach towards the queen side. But at some point also the g7 pawn will fall. I don't know how important is that. King c6 probably stopping black's king of reaching to d7. That's a key idea.
And if black tries to go through d8, then suddenly the king zigzags back to b5 in order to hit the rook. And the problem is that g7 now is likely to fall. Let's say black goes rook a2. And at this point, the pawns are just going to be overwhelming. a6, bishop a5, c6. But this is all not easy. I mean, all of these moves, all of these critical moves like king c6, whereas the move c6 actually draws, because you reach a situation where white cannot make progress. c7, there's king d7. The a pawn is immobilized. If you take on g7, you drop a5. So here black has something resembling a fortress. So maybe it is easier for white to win with the alternate idea of king c6, king c5 and king b5, with the idea of a6 and bishop a5, building the bridge and slicing off the rook from its defense of the promotion square.
Yeah, and rook f5 on the board.
Okay.
Magnus has played the move. Of course, he will not miss the opportunity. Now, Vincent is looking at Magnus that, hang on, you were able to calculate all these lines. Besides bishop d5, there's also bishop h3 with the idea of going bishop e6.
Ah. And then the rook can slide down to the 4th rank, so that when the
Yes.
king moves out, and again, Magnus Carlsen's pieces always seem to be in the right place at the right time.
Yeah, that is very tough. I mean, basically that's game over. Yeah, then the king reaches the desired queenside and enters. So, well, yeah, Vincent needs to decide. Definitely, he already had some kind of a defense in mind. Yeah, because he played the move bishop g2, probably with the belief that bishop d5 takes king d5, king f7 is playable. Yeah, I definitely believe it's unbelievably difficult to find this idea, this incredible delicate maneuver that not pushing the pawns but just moving with the king to b5 is the critical idea.
I think at this point, like I said earlier, 3.5 minutes, Vincent has to realize that if he makes a different kind of move like bishop h3, I feel like his chances of surviving this endgame for the next 15 moves are next to nothing. Doesn't matter who you are. You've got almost no time. You're playing Magnus. You have to try the concrete attempt, because at least there, you have a chance of inducing a tactical mistake. I think Vincent senses that bishop d5 is losing, but it's not that easy for Magnus to demonstrate the winning process, especially because Black does have some counterplay there with a timely g7, g5, and in the complications, you can accidentally let that h-pawn slip through to some sort of simultaneous promotion.
Yeah, but it's so difficult. Yeah, if you play bishop d5 and then your opponent sacrifices and demonstrates that beautiful, incredible technique with king marching to b5, you'll be kicking yourself, why I didn't try a different idea.
True.
So difficult. And basically what we talked about, that one cannot even understand where Vincent has made the mistake, but after the time control, the possession was so incredibly difficult to play, especially with this time control.
And this is what we are so used to Magnus doing. He takes a position that looks completely innocuous. Vincent plays it perfectly for a very long time. But that e5 move, right, blasting through in the center, posing practical problems and transforming the pawn structure from a healthy one and one that is easier to navigate to one where Vincent has to deal with all these isolated pawns and awkward pieces. And that put a little bit too much pressure on him. It caused him to use a lot of time. That caused him to commit a couple of inaccuracies. And now he's staring down the barrel of a potential loss. You can kind of see it in his face. He's down below 2 minutes. And I still maintain that he is likely to try bishop d5 here, but we will see.
Yeah, what else? I mean, computer always keeps on suggesting this move g6, but I mean, humanly speaking, look at this. Then Black's king will be in mating net.
Wow.
All kinds of discovered checks are possible. I don't know. I don't see anyone ever playing the move g6 here.
The final minute for Vincent Keymer, and everything is on perfect places. The bishop on c3 holding so many of the squares and holding the a5 pawn. The rook on f5 cutting Black's bishop, preventing it from attacking the c4 pawn from behind, and controlling the d5 square, preparing the exchange sacrifice, and the king preparing to infiltrate to b6 and supervise the a pawn through to promotion. Magnus, he's excited. He's getting up and sitting down, and now he's gotten up again. And Vincent down to 40 seconds. He doesn't see a move. There is no move.
And also, there is no move. I mean, he sees bishop d5 and he has calculated it, and he probably feels that, no, he goes bishop h3. He's trying to get that bishop to e6. But it almost feels a little bit like a panicking move, how he made that move. Yeah, it didn't look like he believes. The problem is that rook f4, bishop e6, king c5 is exactly that dream construction for white. Eventually, you might be able to even play bishop b4, freeing up the rook. It looks winning.
It feels like Vincent's last minor chance maybe is to go after that h5 pawn to capture it and to just close his eyes and run his pawn majority up the board. But obviously that would be way too slow. And white has so many different ways to ensure the progress of the a pawn. Of course, all of it starts with rook f4, which Magnus is going to play as soon as he returns to the board.
Yeah, I mean, basically in Magnus's body language, we could sense that he believes that he's winning. I mean, you could see that he's very excited. He's super focused. The way how he was drinking that bottle was indicating for me that he knows everything about this position already.
It's funny you bring that up, Peter, because my friend and I always talk about this, how when players drink a lot of their beverage at the board, it's generally a sign that they're satisfied with their position. Somehow, when someone is a bad position, you're not thinking about staying hydrated. When you have a good position, you're comfortable, you're thinking about other things, your body language changes perceptibly. And that moment when Vincent missed knight takes c4 and Magnus just sat there for 30 seconds, he realized that he had a new lease on life. He had another serious opportunity to make a comeback in that endgame. And at this point, only the craziest of miracles is going to save Vincent, who's down to his last 30 seconds in a hopeless position.
Yeah, I mean, you called it bishop e6, king c5, bishop f7 is kind of the defense that we are expecting. The big question also, how will white, probably white is spoiled for a choice. I mean, white has big opportunities there, but black has to try it, and down to 15 seconds.
And he has put the bishop, I believe, on e6. And Magnus, obviously, making forced moves. This is the fun part for Magnus. King c5, the idea is to protect the c4 pawn laterally with the rook, and of course to set up the potential idea of king b6, which will enable the further progress of the pawn. Has to try bishop f7 here. No other moves.
Yes, he has to try. No, he tries rook a3. He played the move rook a3, I believe.
Okay, but king b4 will push the rook off of the a file, and I think that might win by force.
Yeah, that could be. Bishop b4 is also tempting. Yeah, that was also some kind of my idea, just to get. I mean, both moves are very interesting. Your idea is king b4, rook a2, king b3. Yeah,
King
coming
b3.
back with the king.
Now the pawn doesn't promote. Black can stop the pawn by ferrying the rook back to the 8th rank, but we already know that that scenario is completely hopeless. The scenario where the pawn reaches a7 and is supported by the bishop. So for example, I could make the moves on an analysis board as Magnus ponders his next move. We have a little bit of time here. King b4 pushes the rook to a2. King b3 pushes the rook over to e2. White pushes a6. Black's only hope is to move the bishop away from the e file and to stick the rook on e8. But even the elegant rook e4, Peter, is going to end the game. Rook a8, rook e7, rook b7, rook b8. And if necessary, you can always put your bishop on d4.
Yes, I mean, black is completely paralyzed. That's it. King b4, king b3 is a very easy and instructive way of finishing the game. On the other hand, it's psychologically difficult, right? Because white's king was trying to enter into black's territory, and then coming back with the king isn't that intuitive, but kicking that rook away and being able to push that pawn to a6, that's what matters. After all, we wanted to get king b6 also with the idea of going a6.
And your move, bishop b4, I think also is completely winning, no doubt about that. Perhaps Vincent can try to squish his rook into a4, make it as difficult as possible for white to make further progress. But it feels like maybe even rook f3, rook a3 should yield a decisive advantage. And Magnus has made a move. It's king b4.
Played.
It's king
King
b4.
b4, yes.
He
Okay,
sees the
super
decisive
clean.
idea.
Yes. Of course, Magnus does not miss chances like this. Yeah, king b3 will be played if already king b4 happened.
A1 is protected. That bishop on c3, that's the game-winning piece. It's controlling every important square on the entire chessboard. It's controlling a1, d2, a5, any square that the black rook could use for defensive purposes, that bishop is controlling.
Yes. I mean, there is another defense with rook e2, a6, bishop c8, a7, bishop b7, but it's also such a passive defense that I don't believe at all. And okay, we don't believe in anything anymore. White will just win with rook d4, activating the rook.
And the debilitating thing, that pawn on h5 still holding black's pawns on dark squares. So in certain situations, white doesn't even have to promote the a pawn. White can go rook d7 and start collecting the kingside pawns, rook takes g7 and rook h7. Way too many angles and avenues that white could take to win this game. Unfortunately for Vincent, I mean, this is Resign's territory.
Yes, and basically an incredible illustration of how big dangers there are in opposite colored bishop positions. Seemingly there is very little material. Yeah, rook e2 is played, but I mean the quality of the pieces, and if one side has the upper hand, the other side is so tied to defense, and you can't really defend passively such positions. Magnus shows incredible technique, and now it's really just a matter of time when the game ends.
What a match. What an incredible 2 games. And both players have had their amazing moment in the sun. It was Vincent's time yesterday, but today Magnus Carlsen showing why there is a strong case to be made that he is one of, if not the greatest endgame player of all time. His ability to make something out of nothing, his storied ability to convert wins out of seemingly thin air. It's not an exaggeration. He does it time and time and time again. He does it on demand. He does it in any time control. And he just always seems to find the one way to put the maximum amount of problems, no matter who he's facing and no matter what kind of form his opponent is in. Bishop h3 by Vincent. He goes for the first defensive approach. And I still think that a7 and rook e4 is going to end the game right then and right there.
Yes, exactly. I mean, look at this. Vincent is already looking at the distance. He is thinking about, what went wrong, where it went wrong. And a7, rook e8.
And Peter, the feeling he's going to experience when he realizes that knight takes e4 would have potentially sent Magnus packing. That's, I think, what's going to be hard for him to deal with. And that's what he's going to have to push out of his mind. Because tomorrow's tiebreakers, and he doesn't have to lose them if he plays well.
Exactly. And the point is that yesterday he discovered this incredible tactic with knight takes d5 from a distance, yeah? This is the point that there he believed that this is a natural outcome, but here it was so unexpected.
It came out of nowhere. It was a crazy construction with 2 randomly undefended pieces on h4 and e2. Magnus saw it. You know he saw it by his reaction. And at the end of the day, Magnus Carlsen is so hard to bring down.
Yeah, after he got his position, it was very hard. I mean, Magnus was trying something like for 25 moves, setting up that position that he reached before the time control, where he understood that he managed to control everything, and now he can try to break through. And even this was like a tempo play. After the time control, it still looked like it could be possible for Vincent to defend, but not with this time.
It's so important to clarify that Vincent didn't play this endgame badly. I actually think Vincent played an excellent endgame. We keep coming back to the same thing, which is that it's almost impossible to pinpoint his mistakes. You can't say exactly where he went wrong. Where was the decisive error? Okay, maybe you could claim the decisive error was bishop g2, allowing rook f4, but let's be real. At that point, the position was already practically indefensible. And that just tells us of one thing, which is the extent of Magnus Carlsen's virtuosity in the endgame. He can win games without clear mistakes by his opponents. That's what the greats do.
Yeah, just the structure. Yeah, this harmony, these dark squares, the way how he opened up with a timely, everything worked to perfection. Unbelievable performance.
Vincent.
And now the rest is formality, of course. Yeah, rook e7.
c5, nice idea, obviously, to play bishop g2 and to connect the bishop and the rook, making it as difficult as possible for white to dislodge the rook from a8. But Magnus will take on g7, and then I think go rook h7, and he could even capture the pawn on h6 using a little tactical trick with rook h8 and rook h7. That'll win the black
he can
rook.
also do. He can also play rook b7, provoking bishop g2, and then rook takes g7, capture the bishop. It's also possible. Everything wins.
Oh yeah, very true. And with 25 minutes, I mean, this is pure agony at this point for Vincent. Just kind of waiting for Magnus to choose the winning approach.
Yeah, basically it's not about this game. It's just coming to terms, that he was so close. He felt like he believed that he can hold this position against Magnus. But Magnus just shows his beautiful technique. Yeah, rook b7 on the board.
Yeah, it's that debilitating inevitability that you know Magnus is going to find the best moves. You reach a point and you just know that you've lost the thread, and no matter what you do, Magnus will see the correct path forward. Rook b7, threatening rook b8 check, and bishop g2. Rook returns, captures g7 with a fork on the rook and the bishop. Vincent might resign here.
Yes, you basically have to design. No matter how much it hurts, there is nothing you can do.
We can all sympathize with the pain. The pain is immense. The pain of knowing that you had that chance, it was right there. But it's up to the greats and to the chess professionals to push that pain away. It's a 1-1 score. They're going to play a tiebreaker tomorrow, and there's the handshake. Magnus Carlsen wins on demand. He defeats Vincent Keymer after his loss yesterday with a beautiful endgame display and takes this match to what is going to be an incredible tiebreaker tomorrow.
And now I'm curious whether will Magnus show the move knight takes e4 to Vincent, or they will not talk about the game anymore.
Let's see. They're setting up the pieces. Doesn't look like there's any conversation between the players right now. Yeah. Looks like they'll set up the pieces and head to their respective hotel rooms.
And there is also the drawing of lots of the tie breaks immediately. I think this is what they're gonna do now.
Ah, so who plays white in the first game?
Exactly.
Man, what a tiebreak match this will be. Whew. Crazy.
Well, now obviously Magnus has the upper hand. Psychologically bouncing back.
And there it is. Looks like Vincent will have the white-black pieces to start their two-game mini-match. Yes, Magnus will have white, Vincent will have black, and they will be playing the two-game rapid tiebreaker with the time control continuing to decrease with every 1-1 tie. The arbiter there explaining their rules. Both players understand, and now it's time to rest and to prepare for the epic continuation of this match tomorrow. Of course, Magnus must be feeling tremendous relief. Tremendous relief because he can construct an alternate reality where one move later, he would have essentially seen himself on that plane back home.
Yes, that was insane moment. Also very dramatic. It resembled the incredible slip in the Magnus Carlsen against Vishy Anand from Sochi, when Magnus blundered those 2 pawns and Vishy was thinking, and he did not believe, because Magnus was having the upper hand in that position, that Magnus has blundered. Yeah, there are all these historical moments.
And mutual blind spots. We talk about them a lot. They most often happen when nobody's expecting for there to be a tactic, and amidst the clear blue sky, and particularly an unusual tactical construction. We're all human. Even 2700s are human. We hold super GMs to such a high standard, but we got to realize that everyone's human. Everyone's subject to the same pressures and the same anxiety. And we are down to one remaining game in the open section. It is Vukatura, who is trying to save a very difficult position against Salem, and he is being successful. I think he is on the cusp of holding Salem to a draw here, although it's still sharp.
Yeah, it's sharp. I feel like from the position that we have witnessed, Salem might have been fooled by the fact that he wanted to give checkmate to this king, because it looks like there should be something. On the other hand, you are pinned with the rook, and I don't exactly see the mating construction.
Is it crazy to say that Black, in certain cases, has to be a little bit careful if he gets a little too cavalier with some of, like, Queen G4, check King G2? Already, White is up a pawn, and you have to be careful not to lose A6.
Yeah, that's true, but that's somehow insane, yeah, because it looked like Salem had such a golden opportunity, but maybe it was much more tactical. Maybe it was some move position.
Okay, so...
And then how does Black play now?
I don't see a good move here. I mean, Queen can stay on this diagonal, but you have no threats. And perhaps White could even keep pursuing the Queen, like Queen E4, Rook E2, Queen D5, Rook D2. And I don't see a single way for Black to create a mate threat here.
By the way, just on move 51, just one move ago, Daniele has captured that pawn on B7, so he had nerves of steel to grabbing that pawn.
And then rook b2 to f2, deflecting the queen using the compromised nature of the c6 rook. Queen takes f2, queen takes c6. Black can give this check on f1, but white could even walk his king up to h4, and there's always queen f6 check. I think they're likely to repeat moves in some way, but maybe even Vokatura will start playing for a win soon.
Yes, so queen g4 check, king g2. Now I'm expecting the move queen e6, yeah, bringing stability. Yeah, it's blitzed out. After all, white's king on g2 is way too vulnerable. I mean, it's so difficult to imagine that white can play for a win. Besides, the a5 pawn is a weakness.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. No, unless Salem overpresses or does something dumb, he always has the prospect of reactivating his queen and delivering a perpetual along the light squares.
And by the way, the idea that you highlighted with h5, h4 is still very much also an issue in some positions.
Could black play it here?
Well, it's tempting. I mean, h4 is tempting. I wonder is there some... No, I don't see any tactics with f5 or any tricks. I don't have to worry about.
Queen d7, queen c4. Black has to keep the queens on the board if he is to hope to harbor any remaining residual, very faint winning chances. But in time pressure, high anxiety situation, we've seen crazier things happen. Queen d7, rook c2 maybe.
Wow, what a spot.
But it probably doesn't actually win.
Yeah, but just to add some more spice to the position, right? Yes.
Because that's definitely what we need.
Yeah, I mean, okay, but then h4 is very tempting, yeah? There's h4. How does white react to h4?
h4, I'll tell you, definitely not g takes h4 because of queen g4 check. That's the one thing I know for certain.
Yes, and... But what else? Yeah, this queen d7 looks like the move, but you mentioned this rook c2, and ever since you mentioned, it's such a tempting trick, especially in time trouble.
And the inclusion of h4 could actually help spice up rook c2 even further, because then you could throw an h3 check and drag the white king onto a more vulnerable square. But 3.5 minutes now for Salem, the Emirati Grandmaster, trying to find some way to reignite the spark of the attack that he had a couple of moves ago and seems to be losing.
Yeah, it's such a tense moment. We saw Salem's hand reach out. He's about to make a move. Rook c1. Was it rook c1?
It was.
Yes, it was rook c1.
So the trick still persists. Queen d5, rook c2 is possible. But in that case, it's definitely not the most dangerous thing in the world.
Yes. The really big question is who is playing for what? Because with the 30 seconds increment and with little time on the clock, you never exactly know when the game turns, and suddenly the player who was on the defensive might become very ambitious. Queen d5 is so naturally on the board.
Well, rook c2 is a very solemn style move. He sees these tricks and he eats them for breakfast. I think we might see some repetition of moves based on, rook c2. Just to explain for newer players, what is rook c2? Well, if you take the rook, you drop the queen. If after rook c2 you take the queen, black intermezzo captures the rook on d2 with check, and then recaptures the queen with an extra rook. So after rook c2, black is actually threatening to take the queen, because in addition to everything else, the rook pins the white rook. So rook c2, queen d3, and maybe some sort of perpetual with queen c6, and then queen back to e6 is not unlikely.
Yeah, the big question is, will he keep his nerves? Will he be able to spot tactics and tricks that you mentioned he eats for breakfast? Because the tension is enormous here in the World Cup.
You can sense it. You can watch this on mute, and you can sense it coming all the way from Baku. Just the expressions, the hands over the head, leaning over the board, time ticking down, World Cup round 5 on the line. This could not be more dramatic.
Yes, also Daniela sensing that, yes, okay, if Salem makes just one more inaccuracy, then maybe I can try to play for a win. Salem, on the other hand, wants to get to that white king on g2. He feels like, come on, that white king is very vulnerable. No way I I'm not able to use that.
Moment of truth. Solemn hesitating. 2 minutes on the clock. And no, he drops his queen back to c8. Now, that doesn't mean he didn't see rook c2. Maybe he just wants to keep the tension. But this gives Daniele a chance to pursue the black queen with queen d5 to d7, I think is very likely.
But okay, then we go queen a8 check.
Or even
What
queen
happens?
c4.
Yes.
Queen
also
a8,
queen
I go back to d5.
Okay, I go back to c8. I mean, I have 2.5 minutes. I'm happy to make a draw.
I go back to d7. I was worse. I'm also happy to make a draw. And I think the players will follow that kind of logic. Like, listen, we're both happy with a draw. Let's take this to the tiebreak. How about neither one of us does anything stupid, to help the other one advance?
Yes, on the other hand, both are such fighters. Yeah, Salem never likes a draw. Yeah, he always fights till the very end. And Daniele is also such a monster because he has been defending board one for the Italian national team. He has tons of experience against the best players in the world. A lot of confidence there.
For sure. And White's got the extra time here, but Daniele doesn't need it. And did he play e6? Yes, he is going to force a draw. He is going to force the queens off the board. He sacrifices his extra pawn to play queen d7 check. And black should... Wait, black's losing the a pawn.
Yeah, black loses. Yeah, black loses. Okay, he will give the rook c2 check, and then White's king will be stuck on h3, or he has to give up the h2 pawn, or be cut on the first rank. So it should be a draw, but I mean, it's not what black wanted.
And Vocatura will get a risk-free pawn-up position. Now, black could start with king f6. I don't think it changes the actual position, because in either case, White's rook will drop back to d6. And we're going to get the same position. Why flirt with disaster? Just take the queen.
And it all comes down to this rook c2 check. Yeah, this timely rook c2 check that White king is not able to make a good decision. King h3, then the king is stuck on h3 forever. Will not be able to make any progress.
And king h4 always runs into rook takes h2 with either check or even mate in some cases. That's it. That's going to be a forced draw. And indeed, we get the queen trade.
Rook d6.
Rook d6.
Yeah, rook c2 check will be blitzed out.
Indeed. And the king cannot zigzag out of it because you drop the h2 pawn. And with h2 comes g3. Daniele is acquiescing to the clearly dead-drawn position. Salem will put his rook on a2 and start shuffling his king.
The big question, is there some case to be made for mutual Zugzwang after rook takes a6? Yeah, that, for example, after rook a2, rook takes a6, you have to make a move with black. Do you feel comfortable, or do you prefer to play rook b2, rook takes a6, rook a2? However, White anyway plays rook a8, so you will have to deal with that question, no matter what.
Yeah, there are some weird constructions where, for example, White puts the rook on a7 and plays pawn to a6.
Yes.
And suddenly, if black's rook moves away from the second rank, then the king slides back to g2. Now, maybe that is still a draw because black is in time to take on h2 and come back to a2. But suddenly, you're dealing with a bunch of moving parts. Suddenly, White can sacrifice the h-pawn and use the rook laterally. So you definitely don't want that extra complication. That's how these endgames are lost. Like, you allow that extra option, and then suddenly you panic in time pressure. So maybe you're right. Maybe rook b2, rook takes a6, and then rook a2. But what is your response to rook a7 there?
Yeah, the big question is, can I push e5 or, can I push e5 or not?
I think you can, and maybe you should.
But it's a very delicate matter. Yeah, it's also if instead of rook a7 you played rook a8, and then you are threatening to push eventually a6, a7 if my king gets too forward.
I think he's... What did he move? Did he move his king? Yes, he did. He goes king f5. Oh, does he want e5 and then g5?
Wow, rook a6, e5, fe, g5, and then going for the checkmating ideas.
That's lovely, but after e5, White also has rook a8. And e takes f4, rook f8.
Yeah, and then who knows why we need all these adventures.
That's exactly right. e5, rook a8. And it actually gets down to the wire there. It gets down to some concrete lines. Oh my gosh, I saw a beautiful mate.
Yes, you can.
Can
you
I
can
show
just,
this?
Yeah, please, please.
If e5, so just really quickly, folks, the point of this move is that after g5, this is not the beautiful mate. Black threatens g4 and rook takes h2 mate. I just had this flash in my head. We were calculating rook a8, ef4, a6 is a move here. And maybe this doesn't work, but I was looking at this line, g2, rook f8, king g5, a8, and g1 knight. Yes, it does work.
Yes,
And
beautiful.
h4 mate. And this is a necessary line, actually, because g1 equals queen, I think, loses the game to queen d8 with a mating attack. So the conclusion of this line is that after g2, black is actually winning, which means that in this position before a7, white would have to recapture on g3, and obviously this is a dead draw.
Yes, then the king hides. Wow, it just shows, yeah, rook takes a6, e5 on the board, very much Salem style. He's always
Super
trying,
concrete.
yes, always going for tactical lines, always finding brilliant ideas. But let's see how they will handle the nerves, because Salem is down to 1 minute 48 seconds.
Watch this mate happen. I mean, I've seen crazier things, but with 7 minutes, right? That's why I think Vocaturo is not going to do anything insane. I think he is going to play rook a8. There's nothing to lose from playing that move. He will play
Yes.
rook a8. I'm quite positive of it.
Yeah, because other moves are not really winning attempts, right? I mean, f takes e5, e5 is just a thematic draw. Then white will have to play g4 to create luft for his king. That's nothing to talk about. Rook
Only
b6. I mean, yes, kind of. Okay, you also have rook f6 check. Yeah, you don't. But g4 is the cleanest, of course.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. Very dramatic. What a fight. At the moment, it looks like it might also be heading to tie breaks. We already have so much tie breaks tomorrow. Unbelievable.
We will have our hands full tomorrow with so many amazing matches. Just reading out some of the matches that are going to tie breaks tomorrow. We will have Nepo against Nihal. Obviously, Magnus Carlsen, his match, and Hikaru's match are both going to tie breaks. This is going to be an absolute treat for the chess lover and many others, including Gukesh Esipenko and Duda Maghsoodloo. But let's watch the conclusion of this game. Rook a8 is on the board. And Salem, by no means should you play e4. That loses.
Yes, he has to take on f4. He has to see this incredible tactic that you mentioned. Big shout out to you that you managed to spot this under these circumstances.
Well, I appreciate it. Under promotions, that's my realm. I feel like that's all I look for. Combinations involving making a knight. That's I have a soft spot for them.
Yeah, actually, when you mentioned the mate, I saw a different mate, and that was e takes f4. How was it? a6, f takes g3, h takes g3, g5, rook f8 check, king g6, and if white pushes a7, then g4, king h4, rook h2 checkmate.
And that's why white would have to go g4 in that situation. 48 seconds for Salem.
Very tough.
Is it possible that he's panicking and seeing a6? No, he took the pawn. He took the pawn. Vocaturo might as well try a6. Just don't get yourself mated.
Yeah. I mean, he will definitely make a move which keeps chances, but also rook f8 check and rook takes f4 and just playing this position, or because rook f8 check, you can't go king e5 because of g takes f4 check.
But rook f8, king e6, I think you actually should play g f4 because rook f4, rook a2,
rook
and
a2,
I think the pawn
yes.
cannot be defended, and unfortunately there, white's winning attempts are exhausted.
Exactly, and also king h4, rook takes a5 stops king g5. Very important as well.
Exactly. Vocaturo calculating a6. There's no doubt about what he's... If he didn't see a6, he would have played rook f8 check a long time ago. Okay, big moment.
Very big moment. What a fight. Unbelievable.
So many stages, too. You think, okay, it's a repetition? No. You think it's a queen trade? Okay, no. Like, every time you think that all of the resources have been exhausted, either one of the sides finds a way to spice things up, whether it's Vokatura with e6, and now Solemn with this incredible e5 idea. Very creative. In an endgame that you think is ultimately sterile, he still finds something tactical for us to talk about.
Yes. I mean, that G1 under promotion and H4 checkmate, yeah, that's a stunner.
And it's funny that White's queen is, just powerlessly sitting on A8. It's not controlling any squares. But I'm only half joking. I mean, Vokatura still hasn't made a move. But it's an easy line. I mean, if you're calculating it, you gotta see that.
Yeah, I mean, he basically double, triple checks, yeah, and okay, finally you come to it by elimination.
But it's crazy. Without this line, Black would be losing after A6. That's what's awesome to me. And indeed, Vokatura plays the move we were expecting. Now, King E6 is the accurate square for Solemn. Get out of the checking zone of the G-pawn.
On the board.
G takes F4 is likely.
Gf4 is likely, yeah, it's on the board. But okay, now Rook A2, and if Rook A8, King F5, yeah, Black activates the king. And very important that he always, after A6, has time to pick up the pawn on F4, and after A7, hide that king on G5.
Great point. Otherwise, the rook would move away from A8 with check. That's the classic technique, paving the way for promotion. But the king always has this umbrella square on G5 where it's sheltered by friendly forces, particularly on the G file. This game is finally coming to its conclusion.
Well, I don't know. I mean, the players will be still trying till the last drop. Of course, White believes that maybe something is possible, but I mean, this King F5 idea is very clear and clear cut. Yeah, you are able to capture the F4 pawn, and King G3 doesn't help because Black has the check with Rook A3, and Black anyway collects the F4 pawn.
At some point, there is nothing left to calculate. I had an idea, which is Rook A8, King F5, A6, King takes F4. No, if White had one more tempo, there was this crazy idea where White's king slides up to H4. But no. And then I box my own king with H3, and I try to deprive the Black king of this G5 square, but White is not in time.
Yes, the Rook is on A2. Yeah, very nicely placed.
Yep. And that's it. They might repeat moves with Rook F8, King E6. Vokatura might go E6. Although, I wouldn't go A6 because White could end up losing the pawn.
Well, also, we see this time control is very tricky. It looked like Salem is down to 30-40 seconds. He will get into very big time trouble. He made a couple of moves, and he jumped back to 2 minutes, 11 seconds. Yeah, that's why you have to stay incredibly objective. Yeah, you just cannot dream of something, or you cannot really try to play against your opponent's clock. That can easily backfire here.
It most certainly can. I remember the idea I was thinking about, which is King G3, Rook A3 check, and then King H4, hoping for King takes F4, A6, and there the situation becomes very tricky because the Black king is left out to dry.
But then King F5, King F5.
Oh.
Threatening G5 mate.
Wow, Rook F8 check?
Yeah, then King goes back, and your pawn is still on A6.
But you have to go to E5 there, because King E6, King G5, and I can skewer the Rook there with Rook F6.
Oh, wow. Okay, that's another beautiful... That's another beautiful trick. Yeah, I mean, the game goes on. This is nowhere near the finish.
But King G3, what's crazy is after Rook A3 check, King H4, if you play the sloppy Rook A4, I give the check on F8 and slide into G5.
Yes.
Vokatura is going to do it. This is classic Daniele Vokatura. Both of these players, they're going to exhaust everything that's there. It's like Bobby Fischer, the famous story about him playing king versus king positions. It's apocryphal, but this is the kind of spirit that we love to see.
Yeah, definitely. And also it requires incredible nerves. You have to keep a cold head. Yeah, I mean, keep a cold mind. You cannot let all this excitement take on you, because the 30 seconds are there to control your emotions and make sure that you are just making decisions based on everything that happens on the board, not what happens in your brain.
For sure. One more important moment here. King G3 might be the last-ditch attempt, but there's no way that Salim is falling for the last trick after defending so nicely for the last 7 moves or so. Ultimately, Vocaturo's got to be happy that he is finishing this game in the driver's seat, given the miserable situation that he was in with his incredibly exposed king.
Yes, I mean, at that point, with this time control, I felt like if Salem is able to find that h4 play, which was so typical, but probably there was some tactic with rook takes b7, so that's why things escalated the way they escalated. But now it should be a draw after all these dramas.
Indeed. Rook f8 check. Salim, not sure what he's thinking about, but King e4 also draws. In fact, King e4 might be the immediate draw. So he might have seen King g3 and saying, let me deprive you of that opportunity. Let me go King e4 and be ultra clinical.
Yeah, but it's also sometimes dangerous to switch from your already established defense.
Okay, and I think he's gone back to e6. Or has he gone forward to e4?
I think he went back because he also looked at his score sheet, kind of looking at, was this a repetition? Are we heading towards something, or what is really happening?
Okay, Daniel is thinking, but I'm not totally sure what he wants to exhaust. Has he gone f5 check? He did. He's got f5 check. It's still not over.
I mean, but I don't really understand. I mean, gf5, rook a8 isn't a winning attempt. I mean, black can even maybe go king e5, king f4, or is that the trap that is too aggressive? I'm not getting it.
Okay, well, g takes f5 will be played. What we're about to find out. I mean, this is honestly, this is not a serious winning attempt at all. I mean, even king f7, king g7, am I missing something?
Well, also, I mean, the king on h3 is kind of boxed in. Yeah, it's you can even play f4, a6, king f6, or king f7, a7, king g7. You are in time to do everything.
And actually, white would be the one who has to initiate the drawing line there with king h4.
Yeah, I'm not. These are pure nerves. I mean, this is what I talked about. That, I mean, you should not forget about reality. I mean, of course, there is this incredible desire of trying to win a game, but if you lose your calmness, of course, white is not risking anything, but it's certainly not a winning attempt.
For sure. And king e5, king f4 hides behind the f-pawn. And as a matter of fact, there we go. White might have to give up the a-pawn and force a draw with lateral checks, but black will be up a pawn. There was no reason to subject yourself to this if you're Vocaturo. With 2 minutes on the clock, anything can happen.
Absolutely. I mean, if suddenly you face some problems with this king on h3.
Yeah.
I'm not getting this.
This was a really poor decision by Vocaturo. It's still a dead draw in 600 different ways, but pure nerves, as you're saying. Sometimes there's no explanation other than this burning desire to win this match without tie breaks and advance to the next stage and set one more trap and one more resource. But when you overdo it, it starts to backfire.
Yes, I mean, it's a dead draw position, but suddenly it's a position where you can imagine something eventually going wrong. Yeah, that every single move is a draw, but exactly the player with all the nerves finds the only move which loses.
The one way.
Exactly.
Yeah. I always joke with my friend, Sasha Bordnik, you found the one way. There's 10 draws, and then you found the 11th continuation, which consisted of 5 moves that you had to make to even open up a position where there is a losing move. But chess players can be very talented in that regard. There's king f4.
Well, especially in bullet mode, right? I mean, when you have just a few seconds.
h4, Peter. H4. And white loses the a-pawn.
Yes, but okay, still draws. But yes, this is what we talk about, that only white is the one who is risking here.
This was unfathomable. Salim will find h4. White can play rook h8, but the last thing that white should do is try to go after the h-pawn with the rook, because then after king f3, you're boxed in, and
Yes.
it's a super awkward scenario. Probably still a draw, but why subject yourself to this?
Yeah, and all kinds of mating nets. Yeah, then the rook can never leave the h5 because of rook h7 checkmate. Oh my
He's
god,
done
yeah, h4 on the board.
And a little head shake there, exasperated Vocateur. Why did I do this? He asks himself. I could have been home in my hotel room prepping for the tiebreaker. Instead, he has to find one or two more accurate moves.
Yeah, now Salem is in, and look at this. He's sipping
Oh,
from
yeah.
the water. Yes.
What did we say? Now he's the one who's happy.
Yes, because he feels
Okay.
that he can relax, and the pressure is all on his opponent.
The last thing Vocateur wants is a situation with F and H against H, because there you could already start constructing scenarios where something goes wrong. You could accidentally allow a rook trade. You could allow the pawn to slip through the cracks. You want to find something more forcing if you're Vocateur, but there is nothing more forcing. You just have to go rook b8. Rook takes a7, probably give a check on b4, and just start chilling with king g2.
But okay, then rook a2 check comes, and you don't chill at all.
No chill. And then rook a3 and h3 and f4.
Yes.
Oh my God, no way.
Yeah, now suddenly practically it's very awkward. I mean, really, it's okay, according to computer, if you do nothing, it's a draw, but doing nothing is the most difficult thing in chess
Exactly.
if you are panicking.
It's the hardest thing to do in a rook endgame of any kind. You feel like you have to give a check, and you have to move toward the goal rather than sit in the play. But you see how hard it is. He's thinking, he's exhausting the rest of his time. If it was easy, he would have played a move instantly. And he's gone with his rook, obviously, to h8. Okay. And will he play rook takes h4 check, or even king takes h4?
Well, king takes h4 is possible. Rook takes h4 I just hate, because then king f3, f4, and with all this crazy mating, with king takes h4 at least I feel like after king f3 we're gonna go king g5 and h4. Yes, rook takes a7 played.
King takes
Yeah.
h4.
Yeah,
Correct
correct.
recapture.
Yes. Wow.
Phew.
Yes, it's unbelievable. I mean, we know that both these players are incredible, nice persons. We kind of wish both of them the best, but they were really going on to the virus that something might happen here.
I'm still going to, really, it's a rook g7. I go rook g7, then I want to go king f3 and f4.
Yes. Okay, but whenever you go, I mean, I want to go king h5 and h4.
Yeah.
So maybe after
then I
rook
go-
g7, I have to waste the tempo on h3 or not? And king h3, go king h5.
h3, king f3, king h5, king g3,
h4, and then rook g4. I have to
rook
watch that.
g4.
That's lost already, probably.
I think after king g3, white has to go. Whoa, that already might be losing.
No, actually,
And
there,
he's-
what I said that I'm losing after rook g4, it's not true. I have rook a8, rook takes h4, king g5, and I'm exactly in time with rook a3 check. But
Rook
I
a3,
mean,
yeah.
I mean, okay, this is crazy.
Oh, rook a3, rook takes f3. Yeah, no.
Yes.
The fact that we're even talking about move for move draws here is just the most absurd thing ever. Now he's gone rook e7, which is a slightly more open-ended move. Let's see how Daniele handles the defensive task here. King h5 and quickly push h4. This is the right approach.
Yes.
I would have gone rook g7, honestly, but either way, it's a draw.
Yeah, because your idea, I think, after king h5 was to give rook g5 check. Yeah, that was the reason why I
Yeah.
wanted to use that subtle h3 move.
Okay, now Salem's turn once again. No, this is now it looks like a dead draw again somehow.
Yes, and I keep on, talking about that. I mean, thinking about that line that we discussed, that I think my h3 move and followed by king h5 was a losing move, because after king g3, h4, f4 instead of rook g4 might just win the game.
Oh, f4, f3. F4,
Yeah.
king g5.
No, because the
No,
rook is on g7. The rook is on
Oh,
g7.
g7. I thought it was on
Yes.
g2. Sorry, yeah.
Yes. Yeah. No, I mean, okay, but anyway, we are not commenting for ourselves. We are commenting for the audience. They probably have no idea what we are talking about. So yeah, let's stick to the board. It's
All right,
king
rook
e3,
A8,
and it's gonna be a
F4,
draw.
F4, and then you start checking or what? F4, rook A4, rook A3 check, yeah.
Yeah, but still, I mean, okay, it's so nice to be black. Yeah, your pawn is much more far advanced. Yeah, then who knows, some king f2, and you hope for the best.
We saw this in Vidit Bluebaum. I mean, in rook end games, they're so volatile. It's so easy to make one little dumb move. You put your rook on the wrong square. Everyone's done it. Doesn't matter your title, your rating, especially in time pressure. You start panicking. And the moment the seed of doubt is sown in your mind, you will find that only losing line. Okay, f4. And
Yes.
I think the easiest is rook a3 check. And if king f2, you have this move, king g4.
Yes, very important, yeah.
Then white will win the pawn.
Yeah, because if you play king g4 and black goes rook g7 check, that's very scary from human perspective. Yeah, and rook a3 check played. Well done, Daniela.
Yep. He keeps his cool. Doesn't panic. Okay. I think we had a brief camera freeze there, but we will keep an eye on the board itself. And the game should be finishing any moment now.
Yeah, rook a3 check happened. And after king f2, king g4, yeah, that's the key move, the right time. I also root for both players to end this game with a draw, because I can imagine that it would be a total heartbreak if one of them would have lost this rook end game, which was objectively draw. I mean, it would just drive them completely insane. Forget about all the success that they had before in the World Cup.
It would have been great karmic injustice. I think Salam is still trying. Whoa.
Wow, stepping, not giving check. Wow, but check, then king f3. No, then now rook g7 check. Okay, it goes on.
No, but king h3, f3, then you start lateral checking, and black has no shelter. Black cannot hide the king anywhere, so white will just check ad infinitum.
Exactly.
And I think that's the way the game will end. I mean, it's like move for move. It's crazy.
It's absolutely crazy. I mean, Daniel
for
asking
move.
himself, what on earth went through my mind that instead of playing from strengths, I went into this position.
If black had two more tempi, then you get a really interesting position. If black actually could go f2 here, I was trying to evaluate that. I think it's losing.
Yeah,
again,
probably it's...
Just to clarify, this didn't happen just hypothetically, but this is for another day. It's been a long day.
Yes, we are losing our minds. I mean, don't even try to understand what we are talking about. We don't understand ourselves.
Exactly,
Yes.
exactly. But well, neither is Daniele Vocatura understand what he just did. So I guess we're not alone here. We're in good company.
Yeah, that's for sure.
I think it's time for Salam to admit that he will not be winning this game, despite his best efforts, and to play f3.
But yeah, look at his body language. Yeah, he wants to play, and he did not push f3. What did he
They
do?
are finding he moved his rook.
Rook to
Okay,
d7.
but come on, king g2 in Philidor position.
Okay, Philidor, but the game goes on. Rook d2 check. You have a pawn on h2 which hinders you in some way, yeah? No, of course
Yeah,
not.
black finds some exactly. Black hides on h1.
Somewhere, yes. Yeah, king g2 played.
I would even go rook d2, king f1. I would just abandon that pawn because you know for a fact that the Philidor is a draw. You can grasp onto a piece of flotsam in the ocean, you know. But that's it. King f1, Philidor position. And hopefully Salam does not persist in his efforts too much longer now that this has been reached.
But king g1, I mean, white hangs on to his pawn. Because this pawn is useful, yeah, the black king is not able to come via f4, g3, so this makes the defensive task all the more easy. So after f3, just play rook a8, and okay, it's a thematic mechanism.
Yeah, and when we're referring to the Philidor position, it refers specifically to the third rank defense of keeping the rook on the third, or the sixth rank if you're playing black and you're down a pawn. You wait for black to push f3, and then when black pushes f3, it exposes the king's backside. So you put the rook all the way up on a8, and then start giving a million checks to the king.
Yes, Salem sidestep with rook c2. All right, it does not change anything.
H4.
White can play rook b3h. I mean, every single move in the position which does not blunder the rook away, it's a draw.
Yeah. And likely we will get, man, it's like they're playing a bullet game. You know, in bullet, you do this all the time. You go rook b3, rook a2, rook c3, rook b2, because you're trying to catch your opponent on a pre-move. I shamelessly call myself one of the world's leading experts in this kind of, you know, this ultra dirty play. But this is an over-the-board game, so not really sure what Solemn is hoping for here.
Yeah, it's, I think, just calming down. Yeah, there were just way too much emotions involved in the last half an hour in this game. And sometimes it's just nice. You know that you already can't lose it. Yeah, you just can't lose it. Then you treasure the moment. Yeah, you just try to keep your opponent a little bit in the uncomfortable shoes to ask himself the question that why on earth did I do this to myself? But of course, the game will end in a draw.
Yeah, f3 has been played, and that is finally essentially a draw for rook a8. Or sorry, rook c8 is going to follow. And at last, I think we will be spared a 100-move endgame. Although not a given, Vocaturo. And reviewing the Philidor position in his mind, king f1. He will give up the pawn first.
Yes, just to make it exactly according to the books. Rook h2, rook c8. And you can refer, come on, let's open any page in any rook endgame books. Yeah, it's there. Rook c8 seals the game. Thank you very much.
You can even search this position on the database and you will find exactly this position because, of course, this can be reached in a million ways. It's one of the beautiful things about chess. Solemn is going to repeat moves, and this is going to conclude the last game of the second. The second game, and a smile there by both players acknowledging each other's effort and fighting spirit. You got to have a little bit of humor in the situation. It's a draw, and they will go to tie breaks, as will so many other matchups, Peter. If you thought today was epic, just wait until tomorrow.
Exactly, yeah. I mean, the tie breaks are completely insane. We have seen incredible dramas with the so-called classical time control. Imagine what happens when the time control gets down first to 25 minutes, then it gets down to 10 minutes, then it gets down to 5 minutes, and then finally to the 3-minute segment. And all the time, the extra seconds are getting also reduced. It's gonna be insane.
It is indeed, and because of how evenly matched these pairs are, it's very likely that at least one, if not more, of the matchups will at the very least get down to the 5+3 section, very likely to the sudden death 3+2. The schedule, folks, is very simple. We will be coming your way tomorrow, starting at the same time, 7 a.m. Eastern time, 4 a.m. Pacific. So if you're in California, you better set those alarms early because you will not want to miss a single minute of the action in the round 4 tie breaks tomorrow. But for now, Peter, always a great pleasure commentating with you. Nobody I'd rather watch these awesome games with than you. This has been a pleasure. As you said yesterday, I've enjoyed every minute. And I'd like to thank everybody in the chat on Twitch and on YouTube, our lovely producing team, for making this the great show that it is. You make our jobs easy. And on that note, folks, we hope to see you tomorrow for the tiebreaker round of the 4th round of matchups at the 2023 World Cup. But for now, Grandmaster Daniel Nerditsky and Grandmaster Peter Lecko wishing you a very pleasant rest of your Thursday. We will see you tomorrow.
See you. Bye-bye.